The story begins lying broken on the pavement. A dying man swears that this time he will live his life properly. With his final breaths, he vows to leave behind undeniable evidence that he existed in this world. Chaos erupts as bystanders scream for an ambulance, but Minoru Kido realizes with chilling clarity that he is going to die right here in the wreckage. As his life flashes before him, he is consumed by the crushing regret of a lonely existence devoid of friends, family, or any meaningful legacy. Fading into the darkness, he wonders if there is an afterlife waiting for him on the other side. Awakening in a lush forest, a young elf named Lys begs his father to let him forage alone, though his parents worry he is far too young at 10 years old. His father argues that he should wait until he is at least 30, but Lys insists he will be fine despite the dangers lurking in the woods. His mother frets about muscle wolves, but Lys confidently assures them that the beasts won't appear at this time of year. Lys finds his new life of eating and napping in the forest incredibly easy compared to his previous existence. His parents marvel at his rapid growth, noting that most elf children only start speaking at age 10. Since elves live for 1,000 years, his mother worries that Lys is maturing far too quickly for their slow-paced species. Lys recalls his past life as Minoru Kido, the 30-year-old man who should have died in a traffic accident. He realizes he has been reincarnated as an elf, gaining a second chance at life with a lifespan of a millennium. Determined to live without regrets, he shocked his parents by standing and reading within his first 10 years, laying the groundwork for his best life. The village is a paradise protected by a barrier and the great tree Yggdrasil, where time flows loosely and dangerous beasts are rare. It is common sense that elves live their entire 1,000-year lives content within the barrier, never venturing into the outside world. Breathless from running, Lys bursts into the room to confront his parents with a burning request. The ancient patriarch observes the boy, remarking on how energetic Klein's child is compared to the others. The patriarch admonishes Lys for his premature curiosity, pointing out that the boy only learned to speak 5 years ago. Lys' parents hurriedly apologize for their son's intrusion, but the boy remains undeterred in front of the elder. The patriarch warns that the path to the outside is precipitous, though he admits few elves have ever shown such intense curiosity. Having led for 600 years, the patriarch grimly recounts how most elves who ventured out met early, woeful deaths at the hands of humans. He stares down at Lys, emphasizing that the world beyond their forest is filled with unavoidable danger. Acknowledging Lys' exceptional intelligence, the patriarch asks one final time if he truly wishes to venture into that peril. Lys bows his head, expressing deep gratitude to his parents and the village for raising him in this sanctuary. With fire in his eyes, he declares that he refuses to stay in this small world and wants to meet people and leave proof of his existence. He looks up with unwavering determination, stating he wants to live a life completely free of regrets. Moved by the boy's resolve, the patriarch decides not to stop him from pursuing his path. He grants permission, noting with a nostalgic sigh that it has been hundreds of years since anyone dared to leave. Lys cheers in victory, but the patriarch immediately cuts him off to announce a mandatory exit examination. To leave, Lys must master the peak of elven recovery magic and attain a specific level of power within the next century. The patriarch explains that the outside world requires self-protection, so he must pass this exam within 100 years to earn his freedom. Lys calculates that 100 years sounds like an eternity, but it is merely a tenth of an elf's lifespan. He accepts the condition with a grin, thinking that this challenge will actually be great for him. The patriarch warns him gravely that this is not a test he can pass with half-hearted effort. 10 years later, a grown Lys stands before the village and unleashes a massive wave of recovery magic called Order. The patriarch stares in horror as the great progenitor tree, ancient beyond measure, is instantly and fully restored by the blast. He trembles, realizing that the boy has just performed the ultimate pinnacle of elven recovery magic. The patriarch cannot believe that Lys fulfilled the century-long promise in a mere 10 years. Bewildered by the vast power he just witnessed, he demands to know how Lys achieved such a feat. Lys smiles innocently and explains that he has been training his magic power relentlessly since he was a toddler. He reveals he started around age 5, meaning he has been training for 17 years, which leaves the patriarch speechless. Lys explains that he read in the library that human magic is decided by age 20, so he applied that urgency to his training plan. He drained his magic to near zero repeatedly to increase his capacity, treating his growth curve like that of a short-lived human rather than an elf. The patriarch stands frozen at this impossible speed, while Lys cheerfully calculates that he still has 80 years remaining before the exam deadline. Lys casually mentions that dwarfs have earth magic and demons have their own types, asking if there are manuals for those too. He reasons that with enough study and training in the forest library, he should theoretically be able to master other magic types. The patriarch stammers that while there are some manuals, almost all of them are solely for recovery magic. Lise smiles, declaring that since he has 80 years left before his exam officially ends, he intends to learn every other magic he can. The patriarch is left flabbergasted, staring at an elf who is passionately studying magic in an era where demons no longer exist. The patriarch reluctantly hands over the key to the forest's library, granting Lise access to the forbidden book stored within. He warns the boy that manuals requiring no aptitude could take a century to master, but Lise simply thanks him with a bright smile. Lise declares he will absolutely master every type of magic, causing the patriarch to sweat and beg him to do it in moderation. Before he knows it, 10 years of relentless study fly by in the blink of an eye. Lise prepares himself with a hum, realizing it is time for his scheduled appointment. By the age of 30, Lise fulfills his promise to acquire all types of magic, leaving the patriarch exhausted by his antics. To gather more knowledge, Lise ventures out to the barrier's edge to trade with the House of Galanda, the humans managing the surrounding lands. He excitedly greets the human representative, explaining that he generated capital from ancient tree products to buy magic manuals from the outside world. The human representative marvels that someone like Lise exists, admitting that he cannot keep up with the elf's rapid mastery of human magic. The man, Grillet, cheerfully announces that he intends to propose to his childhood friend soon. Laughing heartily, Grillet tells Lise that he would love for the elf to meet his childhood friend someday. Years later, Lise hums a tune as he heads to the meeting spot, eager to see what new magic manual Grillet has brought him this time. Seeing the carriage arrive, Lise approaches with a grin, ready to tease Mr. Grillet about how his impression has changed. He waves enthusiastically at the figure stepping out, but the young man who emerges stares back in total confusion. The young man is baffled by the sight of an elf, while Lise casually asks what sort of manual he brought after such a long time. Blushing with awe, the human realizes that the legends were true and that elves really do exist just as his father claimed. He introduces himself as Gallius Galanda, the heir to the family, stating that this is his first time ever laying eyes on Lise. Gallius explains that his father, Grillet, often told him stories about the mysterious elf in the forest. Lise is struck by confusion, asking if Grillet is truly his father since he felt they had met only a few days ago. Gallius apologizes, explaining that he came in his father's stead because Grillet has grown weak and cannot win against the waves of time. He asks when Lise last saw his father, causing the elf to freeze as the reality of the situation crashes down on him. Lise calculates that it has been 22 years since their last meeting, realizing he completely forgot how fleeting human lives are. Shocked, he calculates that he is now 93 years old and has only 7 years left before his 100-year deadline expires. Lise asks Gallius to send his regards to Grillet, promising that he might visit their family to play once he leaves the forest. Gallius stammers but agrees, assuring the elf that his father will be overjoyed to hear that message. As the carriage departs, Lise tells himself that he should be able to meet Grillet anytime as long as he passes the patriarch's trial. Determined to make the most of his remaining time, he dives back into the library to ensure he won't be bored for the last few years. He picks up a book titled Tales of Heroes, which narrates a nursery tale about a hero defeating a demon king. Lise muses on the human perspective, noting that demons and demihumans who once used magic to control the world are now extinct. He discovers a crumbling manual on recommended movement magics and decides he might be able to read at least some parts of it. Having mastered all modern magic, he sets out to acquire the ancient arts of the extinct races to complete his arsenal. He learns that these ancient magics differ significantly from the 4 basic types and often require special conditions to invoke. With a confident smile, Lise lifts the book and decides to give the ancient spell a try immediately. He decides to test the movement magic by transporting himself somewhere nearby within the safety of the house. Reading the chant for Bezandel, Lise activates the movement magic with a surge of power. He vanishes instantly, wondering in amazement if he really got the spell right on his very first try. He lands face down on the ground amidst a sudden commotion, hearing the low growl of beasts nearby. Lifting his head, Lise blinks in confusion and wonders where exactly the magic has transported him. A terrifying roar rips through the air, accompanied by the metallic scent of fresh blood. An armed man shouts at him in a panic, demanding to know if he is with the guild and where the hell he came from. Lise turns with a blank expression, completely caught off guard by the chaotic situation. He wonders if he accidentally exited the barrier as he scans the surroundings to understand what is happening. His eyes widen as he spots a human child lying motionless on the ground amidst the carnage. Realizing the girl is still alive, Lys freezes as he processes this sudden, fateful encounter with a human. Lys realizes that his new movement spell has malfunctioned and dropped him somewhere completely unexpected. He scans the area and concludes with certainty that he has landed outside Yggdrasil's concealing barrier. A group of armed men shouts in confusion, demanding to know if he is from the guild and where he came from. Lys ignores their questions as he notices a pack of menacing magic beasts lurking behind the men. He spots children lying on the ground and wonders if they were the victims of a muscle wolf attack. His sharp eyes detect movement among the bodies, realizing that one of the children is still barely alive. The men curse their luck, complaining that their merchandise is damaged and now worthless. Terrified by the magic beasts and the sudden arrival of an elf, the leader orders his men to retreat immediately. They scramble to escape, desperate to put distance between themselves and the monsters before they get eaten. Lys watches them run and coldly decides that he cannot allow them to leave after what they have done. He resolves to stop them, setting aside the injured children for a brief moment to deal with the scum. Unleashing a shadow spell called Black Whip, he sends tendrils of darkness racing toward the fleeing men. The bandits scream in panic as the sticky shadows bind them, leaving them completely immobilized. Lys turns his attention back to the threat, preparing his next move with calm precision. He activates a strengthening magic to harden his body, causing his muscles to expand with explosive power. His physique transforms instantly, tearing through his clothes as he channels the raw energy of a beast. With a roar, he unleashes the beast fist, striking the air with enough force to generate a shockwave. The impact sends the magic beasts flying, crushing them under the overwhelming weight of his physical magic. Lys marvels that the beastman magic actually worked on him, having never tested it on his own muscles before. The bandits watch in trembling disbelief, unable to comprehend that an elf is using violent melee magic instead of recovery spells. Silence falls over the clearing as the men stare at the elf, their fear mounting with every second. Lys approaches the surviving child, noting that she is the only one with a faint pulse remaining. He kneels beside her, assuring himself that as long as she is breathing, his magic can save her. He speaks gently to the unconscious girl, promising that she will regain her energy immediately. Lys casts Dragon's Healing Breath, a conflux spell that combines fire and recovery magic in a dazzling display. The bandits scream in horror, mistaking the healing flames for an attack that is burning the girl alive. The mystical fire envelops her small body, seeking out every wound and burn to purge the damage. Under the roaring flames, the torn flesh knits together and the bruises vanish as if they never existed. The fire dissipates gently, leaving the girl completely unharmed and resting peacefully on the ground. The bandits gape in shock, realizing that a wound requiring grand recovery magic was healed in a split second. Lys notices a metal collar around the girl's neck and realizes it is enchanted with sealing magic. He deduces that this is a slave collar designed to explode if anyone other than the master tries to remove it. He whispers to the girl to trust him, promising to free her from the device without triggering the trap. Carefully, he begins to pour his own magic into the collar to overwhelm the existing enchantment. He casts a destruction spell called Devil's Thread, weaving his magic inside the mechanism to sever the trigger. With a quick motion, he rips the collar off and hurls it into the distance just before it detonates. The explosion rocks the air, leaving the bandits terrified that this elf just forcibly disarmed a complex magic seal. Lys stands up and turns his cold gaze toward the captured men, pondering how to punish them. The bandits frantically lie, claiming they were actually trying to protect the kids from the magic beasts. They beg for mercy, sobbing that they were about to be eaten and only wanted to help the children. The bound bandits plead with Lys to remove the spell now that the beasts are gone, hoping to slip away unnoticed. Lys coldly asks if they truly tried to help, revealing that his sharp elven ears heard their entire plan to rob the children. The men curse in panic, realizing that the legends are true and that they cannot hide their deceit from an elf's superior hearing. Ignoring their terror, Lys states that he will ask them 3 specific questions before deciding their fate. He demands to know exactly who they are and why they were being chased through such a lethal forest. Pressing further, he asks what their objective was in dragging small children into a place crawling with monsters. He offers a chilling bargain, promising that he might spare their lives if they give him straight answers. Terrified, the bandits scream their confession, admitting they are merely hired slave traders. They reveal that they were betrayed and set up by someone at the guild, forcing them to flee. Desperate for mercy, they explain they only entered the forest to escape their pursuers while delivering their merchandise. Lys listens with disgust, noting that the humans of this world are just as corrupt as the ones from his previous life. He recalls the patriarch's stern warning that he must never get involved with humans under any circumstances. He concludes that these men prove the patriarch right, viewing them as a savage and sneaky existence. Lise internalizes the lesson, vowing never to forget the inherent danger and treachery of the human race. The bandits shout that they have answered his questions and demand he remove the shadow binding immediately. Lise steps forward, telling them that they are about to forget they ever met him. One bandit stammers in confusion just before Lise activates his magic directly upon their minds. He casts Memory Burial, a potent alteration spell that completely wipes their recent memories. Leaving the dazed men for fate to decide, Lise turns his attention away from the trash. The surviving girl looks up at him with awe, asking if her savior is truly an elf. Lise confirms his identity as Klein's child, gently introducing himself to the small human. The girl thanks him for saving her but weeps bitter tears, apologizing for her failure to save the other children. Lise notices a cross-shaped scar carved into her chest and deduces it is a magic brand marking her as a slave. Tears stream down her face as she laments her weakness, wishing she had been strong enough to protect her friends. She clenches her fists, devastated by her powerlessness in the face of such cruelty. Looking at Lise with desperate eyes, she acknowledges that the magic he used was incredibly powerful. She grabs his arm and begs him to take her with him so she can become strong like him. Lise hesitates, torn between the rule to avoid humans and the fact that he has already saved her. He considers taking responsibility and bringing her back to the village, sensing a great resolution within her. Ultimately, he pulls away and apologizes, telling the heartbroken girl that he cannot help her right now. He explains that he is not human anymore, hinting at the vast gap in their existence. Internalizing his thoughts, he reflects on how elves perceive the flow of time differently than humans. To him, the 7 years remaining in his exam are nothing, but for her, it would be a lifetime of waiting. Unwilling to dampen her determination, he decides not to force her into his timeline. He leaves the bandits for the guild to find, entrusting the girl's immediate safety to the authorities. Lise vanishes into the forest, marking the start of the final 7-year countdown. He whispers to the wind that if her determination remains unchanged, their paths will cross again. The girl lies alone in the clearing, holding on to his promise that they will meet again in the future. Seasons turn into years as the great tree Yggdrasil watches over the passage of time. Rumors eventually spread of a nameless woman who rose from nothing to achieve incredible feats. Lise overhears tales of her military prowess, confirming that the girl survived and found her strength. Back in the library, Lise immerses himself in his studies, letting the rumors drift by as he focuses on his goal. A smile graces his lips as he reads, satisfied that his interference allowed her to forge her own destiny. Finally, the century concludes, marking exactly 100 years since his rebirth as an elf. Lise sits with the patriarch, who notes that the mischievous child has returned right on schedule. The patriarch observes him closely, realizing that even after a century, the boy's resolve has not wavered. He asks one last rhetorical question about what happens when a sheltered elf leaves the village's protection. He compares it to a baby mouse jumping onto a battlefield, warning Lise of the brutality of the outside world. The patriarch warns that the outcome is usually clear once you see the fire, implying certain doom for the naive. Lise steps forward with unwavering confidence, declaring that he has trained 100 years for this exact moment. He looks toward the horizon with a fearless smile, announcing that the day of his exit exam has finally begun. The patriarch asks Lise if the examination is finally over. Lise stands in the rain, acknowledging that a century of training has passed. The elder notes that the boy's wish to leave the ancient forest remains unchanged. An unseen voice interrupts, remarking that they have quite a lively child preparing for departure. Lise looks around in confusion, unable to locate the speaker despite hearing the voice clearly. The voice complains that the rascal is troublesome because he is neither inferior nor has he lost to the speaker in any way. The speaker describes Lise's ability as a degree of genius that defies words, hoping he will soon understand his own scope. A cloaked figure steps forward, deciding that she may have to look forward to testing that genius herself. Dropping her hood to reveal a young elven face, Ryab Lowry introduces herself and states she is just under 6 centuries old. Lise repeats her name in shock, recognizing the legendary figure standing before him. He recalls the rumors of a mysterious elf who appears to cure ill humans in exchange for valuable fruits. Ryab blushes with embarrassment, surprised that people actually speak of her in such a manner. Lise excitedly concludes that since she collected books from the outside world centuries ago, she must be a veteran. He stares intently, realizing that she possesses a wealth of knowledge about the world beyond the forest. Ryab explains that her examination is simple, he must survive until she runs out of magic. She adds coldly that she doesn't care if he uses recovery magic, framing the test as a raw battle for survival. Ryab requests that he not go too hard on her, despite having spent 3 centuries training for this. Lys focuses, telling himself that he can officially leave as soon as he passes this exam. Just as he begins to speak politely, he is cut off by a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Without chanting, Ryab instantly unleashes a massive earthen spear from the ground beneath him. Lys realizes with horror that she had prepared the spell beforehand to catch him off guard. He barely manages to leap away as the ground explodes where he was standing just a second ago. Ryab lectures him that humans are unfair, reinforcing the harsh reality of the outside world. She declares that humans are savage, sly, and cowardly beings who prepare spells while their enemies are distracted. Ryab warns him that talent alone is not enough to survive in the brutal world beyond the forest. Unleashing another barrage, she insists that if he wishes to leave, he must at least learn this lesson. Lys counters with Vulang, summoning his own earth magic to block her attack. Ryab notes that his spell is comparable to her earthen spear, acknowledging his quick reaction. She admits she thought he could only use recovery magic since he is an elf, calling him an interesting kid. Staring into his eyes, she remarks that his fighting style makes it seem almost as if he is human. Lys grins and confirms he was human in his original world as he launches himself into the air with wind magic. Ryab identifies the grand magic and wonders if she can shoot him down with a sylph spell. Lys frantically dodges the high-speed wind projectiles, barely avoiding a direct hit. He struggles to cope with her ability to cast powerful magic without any chanting at all. He realizes with frustration that chantless magic is a skill he has yet to master. Despite the danger, he admits that her skill is amazing, though he quickly reminds himself to stay focused. Ryab warns that her attacks are unceasing and that soon he will have no room left to escape. She suddenly remembers a question she meant to ask, pausing her assault for a split second. She asks why he wants to go to the outside world, prompting Lys to question her timing. Lys deflects a blast and shouts that he wants to go because he thought an elf's life was very long, probably. Lys looks back at the elven village, recognizing it as a haven far more tranquil than any other place in the world. He reflects on how this peaceful sanctuary has been his home for an entire century since his rebirth as an elf. No matter how many times he failed in the beginning, he remained dedicated to mastering the art of magic. He knows that every grueling day of training was merely preparation to ensure he leaves a meaningful trace of his existence in this world. His heart is driven by the crushing regret of his previous life where he lacked any real purpose or deep connections. Now, he yearns to explore the vast world and be remembered by others rather than fading away in solitude. With a bright smile, he reaffirms his resolve to leave the forest and fulfill the dream he has nurtured for 100 years. Ryab Lowry watches him silently, her eyes unreadable as she prepares to reveal her own motivations. Turning the conversation, Ryab asks Lys if he is curious about why she decided to venture into the outside world herself. To his absolute shock, she reveals that her grand motivation was simply a desire to eat more delicious fruits. She gazes at a piece of fruit with intense focus, explaining that her palate demanded a variety the forest could not provide. Lys is left speechless as he connects this mundane goal to the legendary stories of an elf who cures humans in exchange for rare fruit. Ryab explains that after 50 years of eating the same bland forest produce, she reached her limit and sought something new. She admits with a straight face that her entire journey into the unknown was fueled by a craving for different flavors. Lys can hardly believe that she dedicated 3 centuries to training just so she could safely forage in human lands. Ryab warns him that his caution was wise, as many of their comrades who left without strength were quickly destroyed by the world. By mastering human magic, she gained the power to travel safely across various lands and sample every fruit imaginable. She admits that over time, the outside world became surprisingly enjoyable beyond just the food she sought. However, her expression sours as she mentions that the quality and flavor of fruits have mysteriously declined in recent years. Recognizing that they have talked enough, Ryab notes the patriarch's impatience and decides it is time to finish their battle. She raises her staff high, signaling the start of the final phase of his grueling examination. Ryab announces she will no longer hold back and intends to use her full power to test his resolve. Lys is overwhelmed as she simultaneously unleashes multiple elemental spells, forcing him to channel every drop of his magic into a counterattack. Shouting with determination, he charges forward and strikes with the explosive power of the Beast Fist. His glowing fist smashes directly into a defensive orb protecting the legendary elf. Ryab examines a broken fragment of her shield, impressed that he managed to shatter the magic material with raw force. She reveals that the orb was actually a human-made magic stone designed to automatically cast spells when mana is applied. She marvels at how humans compensate for their lack of magic power by creating such ingenious and dangerous tools. Lys is stunned to realize that the diverse elemental magic he was fighting against did not even belong to Ryab. Ryab confesses that like all elves, she is only capable of recovery magic and used human tools to simulate other spells. She admits that she relies on these petty tricks to maintain the illusion of a grand and powerful sorceress. While he successfully bypassed her deception, she warns him that the world is full of people who will use similar tricks to crush the dreams of others. With a warm and genuine smile, Ryab congratulates Lys and officially declares that he has passed the test. Tears of relief stream down his face as he lunges forward to give the legendary elf a grateful hug. She gently pats his head, acknowledging the incredible effort he has poured into his century of preparation. The patriarch observes from the shadows, thinking that Lys' strength is so immense he could have been a terrifying demon king in another era. The scene shifts to a bustling human city where people go about their daily lives in the shadow of stone walls. A young woman with long hair walks through the market, ignored by the busy crowd as vendors call out their wares. Approaching a fruit stall, the girl with the cross-shaped scar on her chest asks to buy every piece of fruit the man has. The merchant gapes in disbelief, asking why she would waste such an incredible amount of money on fruit yet again. She softly explains that she only buys them because she remembers hearing that elves have a great fondness for fruit. As she walks away, she reflects on the long years she has spent waiting for the day they would finally meet once more. Her eyes filled with unwavering loyalty, the girl whispers a single word into the wind as she looks toward the future, elf. High in the elven tower, Lys packs the last of his supplies while gazing out at the world he is about to enter. He runs downstairs to find his parents waiting, shouting their names with excitement as he bursts into the room. Lys proudly announces that he passed the patriarch's test, leaving his parents marveling at his incredible achievement. His mother smiles and suggests that since he has plenty of time, he should relax at home for another 10 years. Lys freezes with a strained smile, reminded once again that his parents perceive a decade as merely a short break. He shatters their laid-back expectations by declaring he plans to leave for the outside world tomorrow morning. His mother protests that at 100 years old he is still a child, arguing that he doesn't need to be in such a hurry. Lys counters by revealing that Ryab herself gave him approval, which immediately silences his mother's complaints. She blinks in surprise, asking to confirm that he is talking about the legendary Ryab Lowry. Lys watches his father turn to his mother, who reveals that the great mage is actually like a little sister to her. She recalls memories of when she first entered the forest to study recovery magic, hinting at a shared past with Ryab. His father listens with a look of mild surprise, having apparently never known about this connection before. His mother concludes that if someone as strict as Ryab recognizes Lys' abilities, then they have no grounds to object. His father sighs with resignation, looking at his son with a mix of worry and acceptance as he confirms Lys is really going. Lys nods firmly, but his father suddenly holds up a hand and asks him to wait there for a moment. His mother tells him to sit down so she can do some motherly things for him before he departs for a far-off land. She gently combs his hair and hands him a small accessory, explaining it is the secret to keeping her hair beautiful. She reveals it is actually a protective charm from the divine tree Yggdrasil given to her when she married his father. Tying it into his hair, she asks him to promise that if he ever messes up, he will come home before it's too late. She hugs him tightly, whispering that it would be terrible if he didn't return to them when he needed help. Lys hugs her back and promises to return, his heart heavy with the weight of her love. His father returns carrying a massive sack, announcing that he has gathered enough provisions to last Lys for 10 years. He smiles proudly, explaining that he has been saving these supplies for the inevitable day Lys would leave the nest. Lys shocks them both by casually casting storage magic, causing the massive pile of goods to vanish into thin air. He activates the spell Semitus, opening a dimensional pocket to stow away the supplies instantly. He explains that anything put inside is preserved perfectly by interfering with subspace, leaving his parents dumbfounded. His mother immediately demands he teach her that spell, while his father laughs and praises Lys for his brilliance. The next morning arrives, and Lys waves a cheerful goodbye to his parents as he steps out of his childhood home. His parents wave back, assuring him that since elven lives are long, they will surely live together again someday. Lys walks away feeling a bit sentimental, wondering if he should have greeted Ryab but assuming she has already left. He sets his sights on his first destination, deciding to head straight for the territory of the House of Garlanda. He recalls the heir Gallius whom he met 7 years ago, noting that Garlanda is the sole noble house that interacts with elves. He hopes to finally meet Grillet, Gallius's father, since illness prevented them from meeting during the previous visit. Lys reaches the edge of the forest, recognizing the shimmering boundary where Yggdrasil's protective barrier ends. He steps through the barrier and looks up, pleased to find that the weather outside is beautiful and clear. Just as he thinks it is the ideal day for an adventure, a pack of growling magic beasts emerges from the bushes. Lys remains calm and prepares to cast a fire magic spell called Phalanx to incinerate the threat. Suddenly, a blur of motion tears past him, interrupting his spell with blinding speed. A mysterious girl with a sword slashes through the entire pack in a single swing, trailing fire in her wake. Lys stands frozen in shock, staring at the back of the stranger who just annihilated the monsters in an instant. 7 years have passed, and the girl has been waiting all this time for this very moment. She bows deeply before Lys, addressing him as Lord Elf with profound and unwavering respect. Lys recognizes her by the distinct cross-shaped scar on her chest and realizes she is the same girl he saved from death years ago. Although her memories of the encounter were vague, she never forgot his promise that they would meet again if her determination held true. To his amazement, she has dedicated every single day of the last 7 years to training herself specifically for this reunion. Lys stands stunned that she actually abided by his words to such an extreme extent, appearing exactly where he predicted. He recalls using magic to seal her memories of him deep within her heart after healing her from the verge of death in the forest. Despite the powerful memory seal, she somehow clung to the vow she made to become stronger and find her savior again. The girl offers a mysterious gift, hoping Lys will accept it now that he clearly remembers their shared past as well. She presents a massive wooden box and asks him to look inside, surprising him with the sheer scale of the physical offering. Opening the lid, Lys finds the container overflowing with a vibrant and diverse collection of fresh, glistening fruits. She explains that she heard all elves have a natural love for these sweet treats, so she gathered them from across the land specifically for him. Her incredible collection includes rare Katura fruits from the tropical west and frost fruits from the farthest northern continents. Lys realizes with a sweat drop that the elven love for fruit might be a local rumor spread by Ryab's own eccentric eating habits. He asks how much money it cost to gather such a mountain of produce, only to learn she spent every coin of her bounty hunting earnings on it. The girl becomes visibly despondent and asks if the gift isn't enough, while Lys frantically assures her that it is actually far too much. He accepts her gratitude with a nervous smile, privately worrying that neither of them understands the ways of the human world very well. To his surprise, she asks if she can accompany him on his journey no matter where he decides to travel next. She offers to serve as his expert guide and negotiator, citing her extensive experience as a seasoned adventurer in the human territories. Lys considers her offer and realizes that having a human companion would be incredibly reassuring given his total lack of local information. He asks if traveling with a rare elf like him would be problematic for her, as his kind is scarcely seen by common folk outside the forest. She asserts that she has done everything in her power to prepare for this day and has no worries about the path ahead. With a bright and determined smile, she declares her wish to learn from his incredible strength for as long as she lives. Lys calculates that as long as she lives is only about 40 more years for a human, which feels like a mere heartbeat to an elf. He is flabbergasted by her intense commitment to stick with him for what he considers such a short additional time in his long life. He ponders the idea of a mere 40 years together, finding the human perspective on time both strange and deeply touching. Formally accepting her company, he introduces himself as Lys Klein and asks for her name to mark their new partnership. She hesitates for a long moment, looking away with an uncertain expression as if a hidden weight holds back her words. To his shock, she reveals that she does not actually have a proper name to give him at this moment. She explains that among the members of the guild, she is simply referred to by the title Anonymous. Lys recognizes the title immediately, remembering rumors of a mysterious warrior figure that even reached his isolated village. A legendary fighter who would slay magic beasts in an instant and vanish before anyone could offer thanks. He realizes with a drop of sweat that the elusive figure from the military rumors was actually this girl the whole time. Turning back to him with a serious gaze, she asks if he would be willing to bestow a name upon her himself. Lys stares into her eyes, taken aback by the weight of the request and the absolute trust she is placing in his hands. She explains that she felt as if she was truly born into the world for the first time when he rescued her from certain death. Because he saved her life and gave it meaning, she has spent the last 7 years waiting for the chance to be named by him. Lys is deeply moved, realizing he never imagined a person could view such a brief and distant event in such an important light. He reflects on how a small human girl spent 7 years focused on an event he considered almost absurdly brief. He recalls a memory of his mother in his previous life as Minoru, asking her why she chose that specific name for him. His mother explained that she wanted him to bear more fruit than others and exceed them in life, which is the meaning of the name Minoru. Looking at the girl, Lise decides to pass on the spirit of that maternal wish and bestows the name Minori upon her. He reflects on how he bore no fruit in his previous world but wants to ensure this second life is different for both of them. He is touched that someone was waiting for him so faithfully without even knowing for certain if he would ever reappear. With her incredible drive and talent, he truly believes she is capable of achieving something great by his side in the outside world. Lise announces that their first destination is the House of Galanda and that he intends to head there immediately. Minori excitedly offers to lead the way, eager to be useful to him right from the very start of their long journey. While he waits for her to check the route, Lise decides to sample one of the exotic fruits from her massive gift box. As he eats, he feels a strange tingling sensation and realizes that the fruit is imbued with a surprising amount of magic power. Minori calls out to him with a joyful smile, asking if they should set off on their new adventure together at last. Standing at the guild counter, Lise negotiates the exchange of their latest hunt, offering 1 horned rabbit and 3 slimes to the receptionist. The staff member stares in surprise, realizing that the strange hooded woman standing beside the elf is none other than the famous Minori. As adventurers whisper about Minori's fame, Lise notes that their earnings are finally enough to fund their journey to Margrave Galanda's frontier. The guild staff asks if they are heading to Gallius's territory, confirming that he is the current feudal lord governing those borderlands. They explain that the economy has skyrocketed since Gallius took over, allowing adventurers to finally afford proper meals by hunting magic beasts. Lise stares quietly into the distance, his mind drifting back to the memories of 7 years ago. Reflecting on his journey, he realizes it has already been 3 weeks since he left the safety of the Elflands to explore the world. Minori excitedly points out the path ahead, announcing that Fort Kukure on the Galanda border is just within sight. Lise looks at her with gratitude, acknowledging that having Minori as a guide is a true blessing for an elf ignorant of the outside world. Minori explains that the feudal lord keeps magic beasts on these borders to protect the empire from the threats of the sacred forest. As they walk, she notes grimly that the number of casualties among adventurers seems to be increasing the closer they get to the fortress. She shares a troubling rumor she heard recently about a sudden invasion of magic beasts in the area that is causing unrest. Lise crunches on an apple as Minori worries that Gallius, despite his good reputation, is struggling to deal with the rising threat. Minori suddenly panics, realizing she is about to eat an apple that has touched Lise's lips, and stammers that it might taste off. She takes a bite with a loud crunch, her face flushing as she tastes the fruit she was so worried about. Lise watches her reaction, amused to find that she thinks it tastes better after he took a bite, though he tastes nothing strange. His expression turns serious as he notes that the flavor of fruit has actually declined recently, prompting him to investigate the cause. Utilizing his magic, Lise casts Gronesis, a high-level observation spell, to analyze the composition of the apple. He is shocked to discover that the fruit contains a trace amount of miasma, a substance that should not exist in this world. When Minori asks how the apple was, Lise hides his discovery and simply asks if it didn't suit her taste. Minori quickly denies it, blushing as she admits that she just wanted him to have some and that it was delicious. Lise remains silent, his mind racing as he processes the terrifying implication of the miasma's presence in the fruit. He recalls that miasma is a phenomenon controlled by demons, a race that is supposed to be extinct in this world. As Fort Kukure looms ahead, Lise grapples with the impossible reality that he has found traces of ancient demon magic. At the gate, a guard blocks their path, shouting that he cannot allow a stranger to meet a noble lord like Gallius. The guard insults Lise's appearance, claiming he has watched this gate for 5 years and never seen such an ugly face before. Minori explodes with rage at the insult to Lise, but he steps in to calm her down before she attacks the guard. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls out from behind the gate, recognizing Lise immediately despite the years. Gallius steps forward with a warm smile, unable to believe that 7 years have passed since they last met. He beams at Lise, expressing his happiness that the elf remembered the promise they made all those years ago. Lise pulls back his hood and smiles, confirming that he came specifically to see him and fulfill his word. Gazing at the lord's estate, Lise adds quietly that he also came to see Grillet. The memory takes him back to a conversation with Grillet, who mused about the test required to leave the forest. Grillet had insisted that Lys visit their village and see him once he finally managed to pass the test and leave the woods. In the flashback, a young Lys smiles and agrees, but asks Grillet to do something for him in return for the visit. The scene shifts to a dying Grillet, recalling Lys' request for him not to die until the elf left the forest. Grillet had laughed and agreed, telling Lys that he would have to get out of the forest as fast as he could. Back in the present, Minori asks if he really made a promise like that, and Gallius admits he isn't as good at fighting as his father. Lys explains that Grillet was the first human to ever speak to him, while Gallius notes his dad was renowned as the god of war. Gallius looks at the elf, and Lys smiles softly, confirming that Grillet is his friend. Gallius tells Lys that his father spoke of him often, recalling their shared promise to drink beer and change the world. Gallius laughs and says his dad might be seen as a bad guy for keeping a promise to an elf, but he was simply dedicated to it. He leads them to a room where a man lies motionless, describing his father as a vegetable who has lost everything. Lys stares in shock at the bed, asking with a trembling voice if the man lying there is truly his old friend Grillet. The image shows the frail and unconscious warrior buried under heavy blankets as he clings to the last of his life. Gallius explains his father has been in this state for 5 years and the doctors have completely given up on him. He tells Lys he is sure his father is happy to finally have his elven friend come to visit him after all these years. Lys leans over the bed and softly greets Grillet, asking his old friend how he has been doing in this world. Gallius recounts how his father was a strong warrior who spent 20 years protecting the land from pirates and magic beasts. He reveals that 5 years ago Grillet was found gravely injured on the battlefield and has been fading away ever since. Gallius admits he became the Lord but must rely on the people because he lacks his father's incredible individual strength. He remembers how his father fought and protected the land all by himself even when his body was broken and hurt. Gallius confesses he never realized how truly great his father was until the man disappeared from active duty 5 years ago. Lys is stunned by the revelation, realizing he had no idea his friend's health had plummeted so drastically while he was away. He deduces that Gallius has kept his father's condition hidden to prevent widespread panic among the people of the territory. Lys spots a dark bruise and realizes Grillet was fighting magic beasts alone when he received the wound that ruined him. To the shock of the others, Lys suddenly lunges toward the bed with an intense and focused look in his eyes. He asks Gallius if he knows anything about the mysterious and dark bruise marking his father's withered body. Gallius explains that even the most powerful white magician in the land was baffled and didn't know what it was. He admits that standard healing magic did nothing even when the mage tried his highest level of power on the injury. Lys casts his observation magic, Chronesis, and is horrified to see the miasma content is at a deadly 91%. He confirms the bruise is pure, concentrated miasma and is staggered by the impossible density of the dark substance. Lys understands that the previous mags failed because Grillet's body simply rejected their weak human magic. He asks Gallius to confirm they have already tried every high-level healing spell available to no effect. Lys declares they must go beyond human limits and use the ultimate recovery magic to save his dying friend. Gallius laughs nervously and tells Lys he must surely be joking about using such a legendary and impossible spell. Lys stands firm and states he hasn't been sitting around doing nothing for the past 100 years in the forest. With a determined smile, he vows he won't go home without saying a word to the friend he came to see. Gallius is silenced as Lys tells him to listen carefully and prepare himself for the magic about to be unleashed. Lys warns that even if he wakes up, Grillet only has about 2 years left to live due to the damage. He looks at Gallius and asks if he truly wants to revive his father for such a short and painful time. Gallius weeps and admits he never got to thank his father or tell him he would take over the burden. He begs Lys to bring him back, saying he has hundreds of things he still needs to say to his father. Lys nods and prepares his stance as a powerful and shimmering aura begins to emanate from his body. He thinks of the ancient legend that humans once theoretically reached the peak of this forbidden recovery art. He notes the pinnacle spell normally takes decades to master, but he is ready to cast it in an instant. Lys unleashes the ultimate recovery magic, Rieberel, with a roar of concentrated and divine power. A blinding explosion of light fills the room as the elven magic begins to purge the miasma from Grillet's body. Grillet's eyes slip with joy over his father's bedside. Though he could only grant his friend 2 more years of life, Lys finds deep satisfaction in successfully restoring Grillet's vitality. Gallius is overwhelmed with emotion, unable to believe that his father is actually breathing and conscious once again. Grillet wakes to find Lys standing there, remarking with a chuckle that everything feels surreal while Gallius has grown so much. Looking at his old friend, Grillet notes with a faint smile that Lys kept his promise to visit after leaving the forest. Wasting no time, Lys asks Grillet to recount the specific events of the day he was injured on the battlefield. Grillet tries to remember but explains that while Fort Kukure was under beast attack, his mind suddenly became a complete blur. Lys analyzes this fuzziness and concludes that someone used a calculated memory alteration trick from the other side. Grillet is taken aback by the mention of the other side, sensing the gravity behind Lys' cold deduction. Lys stares intently and asks Grillet if he truly believes that demons, once thought to be myths, have actually returned. He explains that the lethal concentration of miasma inside Grillet's body is undeniable proof of a demonic presence. To uncover the truth, Lys asks for permission to look directly into Grillet's memories to clear away the mental fog. Placing his hands on Grillet's head, Lys prepares to cast a sophisticated spell to penetrate the suppressed history. He activates memory alternation magic, diving into the depths of the warrior's mind to find the last thing he saw. The vision reveals a dark entity dismissing Grillet as a mere human who lacked the specific brave factor they sought. The demonic voice wonders what to do next, ultimately deciding that this human was out of luck in their grand scheme. They ordered a subordinate to rough him up slightly, intending to use constant attacks on Fort Kukure to lure out their real target. The memory fades as the demons plot to keep the fortress under siege without completely destroying it for their own ends. Back in the room, Lys acknowledges the grim reality of what Grillet saw and warns him to stay silent for now. He explains that announcing the return of demons would plunge the world into total chaos and panic. With a confident finger raised, Lys declares he has a simple plan to resolve the situation before it escalates. He resolves to track down the demon's target before they can strike again in the outside world. His eyes burn with focus as he concludes they must find the mysterious individual holding the brave factor. Long ago, a demon lord suddenly introduced the formidable concept of magic into the world. Before anyone could react, the invulnerable demon lord quickly overran and conquered over half the globe. Meanwhile, in a small village, a talentless young man fiercely dreamed of becoming an adventurer despite everyone mocking his inability to use magic. Working harder than anyone else, he eventually mastered the 4 elements and awakened a mysterious new power alongside 4 wonderful companions. Wielding this immense power, the young man known as the Brave Man set out with his party to defeat the demon lord once and for all. Jolting awake in a cold sweat, a young elf boy named Rhys stares at his master in disbelief and questions if this nightmare is real. Clenching his fists in sheer panic, the older man screams out that he simply cannot believe the demons have actually returned. He explains that the memory alteration magic the demons used right before Rhys passed out serves as undeniable proof of their revival. Processing this horrifying reality, Rhys asks if the brave factor the demons mentioned means the old fairy tale is actually true. The master solemnly confirms that they are indeed talking about the famous legend of the hero known by all of humankind. Sweating profusely, the older man desperately insists that the legend was only ever supposed to be a children's story. Rhys quickly recalls reading a dusty battle record about that exact factor back in the library of his elven village. He vividly remembers the text describing this brave factor as an otherworldly force. Connecting the clues, they realize the demons are currently hunting among humans to find the one person possessing this legendary trait. Surging with sudden determination, the master declares that they absolutely must be the first to find this chosen human. Flashing a confident smirk, Rhys points out their one massive advantage is that the demons still have no idea they are being tracked. Furthermore, judging from the enemy's conversation, they are completely certain the target is hiding inside Fort Kukure. The master reflects on inheriting this territory 20 years ago and notes the massive spike in adventurers flocking here to hunt the multiplying magic beasts. Staring at his calloused hand, he deduces that the human with the brave factor must be concealing themselves among those greedy adventurers. A brief silence fills the tense room before Rhys softly calls out to his master. Rising to his feet with a cheerful smile, the young elf bravely announces that he will head straight to the front lines. Shocked by this reckless decision, the master demands to know why the boy would go so far, only for Rhys to fiercely throw the question right back at him. Glaring back at the older man, Rhys insists there is no need for him to shoulder the burden alone now that they are living in the outside world. Adjusting his gear, Rhys casually mentions that he still has 900 years ahead of him and finds nothing more boring than the world itself. Flashing a cocky grin, he confidently states that falling under the control of demons is completely out of the question. 1 week later, a reserved table groans under the weight of a massive, mouth-watering feast. An older woman warmly encourages her guest to eat a lot, sparking a starry-eyed reaction from a hungry young girl. Staring intensely at the towering plates of food, the mesmerized girl practically drools as she calls the spread amazing. Seeking to break the ice, the master gently calls out and offers to introduce the girl to his family. Smiling proudly, he introduces the gentle-looking older woman standing beside him as his beloved wife, Silpha. The young girl's face immediately lights up with pure joy as she realizes this is the famous childhood friend he always talked about. Silpha nervously asks her husband Grillet if he really made a promise to introduce her to an elf long before they were married, which he happily confirms. Bowing deeply with profound respect, Silpha warmly thanks Rhys for everything he has done for her husband. Gripping her dress emotionally, she insists that no matter how much she thanks him, it will simply never be enough. A flustered Rhys desperately tries to wave off the heavy praise while Grillet enthusiastically shouts for his master's attention. Grillet boldly brags about how cute his wife is, causing Silpha to blush furiously. Rhys fondly recalls Grillet's old promise to someday introduce and propose to his incredibly cute childhood friend. Chuckling at the interaction, Rhys playfully notes their weird elven way of praising her but admits it makes him lament the short lifespans of humans. Redirecting everyone's attention to the food, Grillet eagerly asks Minori if they should finally take up the offer to eat. Rhys enthusiastically agrees while the shy Minori timidly peeks over the table and asks if she may eat as well. Devouring the meal, Minori earnestly praises the food, getting Silpha fired up to cook more since the travelers had only been surviving on magic beasts and foraged nuts. Silpha smiles warmly and notes that the energetic girl reminds her of Grillet when he was young. Minori proudly declares the meal is the best in the whole world, flattering Silpha while Grillet agrees it has always been true. Taking a bite, Grillet casually asks his master how he and the young lady know each other. Beaming with a massive smile, Minori suddenly interrupts to introduce herself as Rhys's spouse. Grillet violently spits out his drink in pure shock at the word spouse while Minori politely finishes her introduction. Blushing furiously, Rhys stammers in panic as Grillet teases his elven moves, all while Minori happily declares they will be together forever. Rhys frantically explains that he only let Minori tag along because she wanted to get stronger in exchange for teaching him about humans, leaving the girl pouting. Breaking the awkward tension, Silpha gently calls out to the pouting Minori. Smiling warmly, the older woman asks if Minori would like to try and cook something as well. Minori looks up, completely caught off guard by the unexpected invitation. She nervously admits she is only good for fighting and has never cooked, but Silpha gently reassures her not to worry. Pondering the offer, Minori remembers the old saying that the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Rolling up her sleeves with fierce determination, she declares she will do her best if cooking can make Rhys happy. Meanwhile, Grillet leans in close to his master to whisper something private. He brings up a warning from his old chief that it is extremely difficult for humans and elves to have children together, annoying Rhys with the terrible timing. Unfazed, Grillet bluntly asks what his master plans to do about the situation. Looking down, Rhys calmly states that unfortunately, it does not matter right now. He plainly admits that, for the time being, he simply does not view Minori in a romantic light. Staring at his master with a serious expression, Grillet calls that a true pity. Rhys drops his gaze, silently acknowledging the heavy weight of reality. He reflects on the tragic truth that Minori will die long before he does. Staring softly ahead, Rhys notes that Minori is already well aware of that heartbreaking fact. In the kitchen, an overly enthusiastic Minori wields a kitchen knife like a weapon while Silpha nervously tries to guide her form. Watching her bright smile, Rhys admires how she still bravely pursues her feelings despite knowing their inevitable future. Sometime later, Grillet tells the duo he is counting on them, and Rhys cheerfully agrees as they prepare to head out. Glancing back with a confident smile, Rhys signals that they are ready. A bespectacled man warns them that their destination, the Great Circle Forest, is an uncertain place trapped right between Fort Kukure and Ritor where the beasts gather. He sternly tells them to be careful out there, prompting a serious nod from Rhys. Leaving the estate, Rhys notes that the forest seems to be the main hunting ground for adventurers taking down magic beasts. He deduces that staking out this area will let them monitor both the adventurers and the beast master, though he admits he hasn't personally entered this specific forest before. Formulating a plan, Rhys suggests they use a vacant house in the forest as their base, just as Grillet advised. Walking beside him, Minori wonders aloud if it is truly possible to find the one person possessing the brave factor. Rhys admits their only clue is the fairy tale about someone lacking elemental magic, which normally means they would have to force everyone to use magic in front of them. However, he confidently reveals that his appraisal magic should instantly tell him whether someone has the hero factor or not. Pulling her hood tight, Minori points out the daunting reality that they will still have to individually appraise droves of adventurers. She turns to him with sparkling eyes, absolutely amazed that he can use his magic to locate the hero. Reese humbly agrees, sending Minori into another swooning fit over his greatness. While she praises him loudly, Reese quietly activates his appraisal magic to check his own status. Staring at his status window reading Otherworld Reincarnated, Reese realizes that his own existence is literally a power out of this world. Reese stops in his tracks and gently calls out to Minori, prompting her to turn around with a surprised response. Looking at her seriously, he asks if she is really okay with this arrangement. Looking utterly confused, Minori asks what he means about coming all this way with him. Reese gently reminds her of their previous conversation, warning that it could take a very long time to actually find the one possessing the brave factor. He explains that they will be holed up in this isolated forest for a while and that the search might even take years. Hesitating slightly, he trails off as he considers the true weight of the commitment. He silently worries that this endless mission could completely mess up her entire, incredibly short human life. Breaking the heavy silence, Reese offers her an out by stating there is still plenty of time for her to turn back. Frowning fiercely, Minori loudly declares that she has already made up her mind. She passionately reminds him that she spent an agonizing 7 years desperately chasing after his illusion. Getting right up in his shocked face, she angrily yells that she had already told him her answer. Softening her expression, she explains that true happiness for her simply means staying by his side. Adding that she also wants to grow stronger alongside him, she leaves Reese completely speechless. Flashing a brilliant, unwavering smile, she vows to follow him for the rest of her life. Leaning in aggressively, she insists she will never leave his side even if he tells her he doesn't want her around. Overwhelmed by her sheer intensity, Reese stands frozen and stunned in the middle of the path. Blushing heavily, he covers his face and frantically wonders why her proximity just made his heart race. Desperately trying to calm his beating heart, he flinches when Minori suddenly calls out his name. Pointing excitedly into the distance, she happily announces that she can finally see the house. Trudging through the brush, Reese notes that they are about a 6-hour walk away from Fort Kukure. Curious about a house in the middle of nowhere, Minori listens as Reese explains that Grillet's predecessor used it as a vacation home before the monster population exploded. Imagining a grand estate, Minori gets starry-eyed at the prospect of staying in a noble's luxurious vacation home. Rushing ahead with high hopes, she excitedly expects the property to be incredibly luxurious. Staring blankly at a dilapidated wooden ruin with a broken door, Minori's hopes shatter while Reese flatly suggests they start by cleaning it up. Staring in pure disbelief, Minori turns pale and drops what she is holding. Noticing her utter shock, Reese frantically asks what is wrong as she stares blankly at him. Still frozen in place, the young girl quietly stammers his name while keeping her gaze cast downward. Looking at the now pristine mansion, Minori screams that he just used magic to completely clean the ruins in a single instant. Reese cheerfully agrees that the trick is handy, leaving Minori weeping as she laments losing her one chance to finally be useful to him. Casually waving his hand, he explains that he simply used spirit magic by making a temporary contract with the local spirits. Puffing his chest out with pride, the elf adds that he successfully deciphered the complex magic back when he was 78. Spotting her gloomy aura, Reese frantically asks if she is depressed, prompting Minori to fiercely deny it before suddenly pausing in confusion. Brushing off the awkward moment, Reese casually declares that it is time for the finishing touch. Focusing his intense power, the young elf softly calls out to the Yggdrasil sylph. A glowing sphere materializes perfectly in his open palm as he prepares to cast a powerful barrier magic. Minori stares at the glowing orb and curiously asks what it is just as Reese happily announces that the spell is complete. Flashing a confident smirk, Reese simply tells the mesmerized girl to wait and look at the results. A massive, shimmering dome expands outward from the house with a soft pop, completely washing over the surrounding trees. Pointing to the sky, Reese explains that the barrier has successfully rendered the entire building invisible to the outside world. He proudly states that neither magic beasts nor demons will be able to find them while they safely search for the one possessing the brave factor. As Reese notes that the spell is just a simple version of Yggdrasil, Minori casts her gaze downward and reflects on how he can do absolutely anything by himself. She recalls the time Reese kindly claimed he only let her accompany him because she wanted to get stronger in exchange for teaching him about humans. Gripping the wooden railing tightly, she bitterly laments that she cannot do much of anything for him despite him constantly thanking her for being there. Staring at his gentle smile, the young girl silently admits to herself that he would be perfectly fine on his own. Clenching her fists by her side, she acknowledges that staying with him is merely her own selfish desire. Delving into her dark past, she remembers how she never knew her parents and only managed to survive as a miserable slave. A vivid memory flashes by, showing Reese extending a warm hand to save her just as she was about to be brutally killed. Shunned by everyone for being a former slave, she spent the next 7 grueling years doing everything possible to gain power so she wouldn't waste the life he gave her. Steeling her resolve, she remembers how the fated time finally arrived on the promised 7th year. She recalls standing at the agreed spot every single day, desperately waiting for Reese while clinging to the memory of her savior. Smiling brightly at Reese in the present, she silently wishes she could tell her past self that her dreams finally came true. Her bright smile immediately drops as she grips her skirt, realizing that she simply cannot be happy with just this arrangement. Filled with renewed conviction, she firmly decides she doesn't want him to keep her around merely to satisfy her own selfish wishes. Looking up with burning determination, she deeply desires to do more so she can actually prove useful to him. Glaring fiercely ahead, she swears she wants to become much stronger so she can properly fight by his side. Breaking her intense silence, she suddenly calls out his name and asks if he is planning on doing something specific. Staring at him seriously, she asks if he plans to take the person with the brave factor under his protection so they can eventually defeat the Demon Lord together. Reese admits he lacks the brave factor needed to defeat the Demon Lord, meaning he will likely have to train alongside that chosen person first. He adds that he wants to do his best to stop the Demon Lord, even though he currently has no idea how far into the future that battle will take place. Minori loudly insists that he could easily defeat the Demon Lord himself, showing absolute confidence in his overwhelming power. Taking a deep breath, she nervously asks if he could train her during their extended stay in the forest. Genuinely confused by the request, Reese points out that she is already strong enough to defeat powerful magic beasts completely on her own. Clenching her hand over her chest, she firmly declares that she wants to fight the Demon Lord right alongside him. Smiling softly as he realizes her goal was always to get stronger, the young elf warmly agrees to her request. Dedicating themselves completely to their mission, Reese and Minori intensely trained together in the secluded forest. Time flew by relentlessly as their peaceful days quickly turned into long months. Before they even knew it, 2 entire years had passed since they started their isolated routine. A firm, heavy boot stomped into the dirt as someone prepared for an intense battle. Sprinting swiftly ahead, Minori fiercely called out to her master while charging toward the enemy. She confidently reported detecting 5 magic beasts rapidly approaching from their 3 o'clock position. Glaring intensely at the tree line, she pinpointed that the pack consisted of 4 B-rank beasts led by a single dangerous A-rank monster. Verifying her tactical analysis with his appraisal magic, Reese proudly noted how remarkably adept his companion had grown. Flashing a cocky smirk, he challenged the young warrior to take on the deadly A-rank beast all by herself. Without a single second of hesitation, she eagerly accepted the challenge and swore he could completely count on her. Trusting her newfound strength, Reese casually declared that he would handle the rest of the pack. Diving smoothly into the thick underbrush, the elf quietly observed the ensuing battle from a safe distance. A ferocious flock of massive, terrifying cockatrices squawked viciously as they charged forward. Conjuring powerful wind magic around her body, Minori prepared to unleash her first devastating strike. She swung her blade gracefully, unleashing a massive wind scythe named Mantis that sliced right through the approaching horde. Analyzing the strange battlefield behavior, Reese realized the surviving beasts were completely ignoring Minori's obvious killing intent. Lowering her weapon slightly in confusion, Minori quickly deduced that the monsters were actually running away in sheer terror. A colossal, menacing wild bear exploded from the shadows, proving to be the true threat that had scattered the lesser beasts. Unfazed by the towering predator, Minori calmly enchanted her sturdy sword with high-rank fire magic. Pushing her magical limits even further, she furiously ignited her blade with ultimate-tier fire magic. A roaring, magnificent pillar of flames erupted from her sword as she successfully invoked the blazing phoenix. Screaming with raw, explosive power, the young girl swung her burning greatsword with all of her might. The devastating fiery slash instantly engulfed the giant bear, completely obliterating the beast in a single, blinding strike. Panting softly to catch her breath, she turned back toward the brush and called out to her hidden master. Gripping her warm hilt, she beamed with pure pride and announced that she finally managed to control ultimate magic. Emerging happily from the bushes, Reese warmly praised her incredible growth and effortless victory over the wild bear. He gently suggested focusing on stamina training next so she could keep fighting after using such exhausting spells, earning a bashful giggle from his student. Staring closely at her radiant face, Reese suddenly realized that something about her appearance had subtly changed. Connecting the dots in his head, he quietly noted that they had been intensely training in this isolated forest for 2 whole years. Admiring her mature, confident stature, he silently acknowledged that Minori had fully blossomed into a 20-year-old adult. Flustered by his sudden realization, he hid his deeply blushing face behind his collar while catching a glimpse of the silver ring on her hand. Later that day, Minori proudly presented a delicious, steaming bowl of kakatriso yakidan using Silpha's secret recipe. Digging into the hearty meal, Reese complimented her amazing cooking skills while she happily credited Silpha for all the helpful lessons. Shifting to serious business, Reese asked for news from Fort Kukure, but Minori confirmed there was still no trace of the Brave Factor or the Demon Lord. Staring thoughtfully into his empty bowl, Reese lamented that they hadn't even encountered the mysterious demons from Grillet's altered memories. Resting his chin lazily on his hand, he casually accepted that their quiet, secluded life would continue for a while longer. Suddenly sensing an incoming magical transmission, Minori eagerly rushed off to check a magic messenger arriving from the fort. Left alone at the table, Reese curiously pondered the fascinating mechanics behind such advanced magical communication tools. Bursting violently through the door with frantic urgency, a panicking Minori loudly shouted his name. Startled by her fiercely trembling hands and the crushed letter, Reese immediately jumped up and demanded to know what was wrong. Bursting with sudden urgency, a messenger frantically announces that something terrible has happened to Grillet. Adjusting his glasses with a somber expression, Gallius delivers the crushing news that Grillet does not have long left to live. He solemnly explains that the beloved lord has, at the absolute most, only 2 short years remaining. Springing into action without a moment to lose, Reese immediately decides to use teleportation magic to jump straight to Margrave Garalander's mansion. Arriving in a flash, Reese warmly greets Gallius as the grieving man profoundly thanks him for taking the time to come. Stepping into the hall, Gallius expresses his deep gratitude for their visit while Silpha gently welcomes Minori alongside them. Kneeling down to meet the young boy's gaze, Reese offers a warm evening greeting to little Vice. The young child looks up with innocent eyes and politely returns the greeting to the elf. Pointing gently down the hall, Vice informs the guests that his father is resting just over there. Guiding them toward the room, Gallius explains that Grillet is no longer conscious but begs them to at least see him one last time. Throwing the heavy doors open, a distressed Minori rushes inside and cries out for the old man. Sprinting to the bedside, the young girl leans over the covers and loudly announces that Reese has finally arrived. Approaching the quiet bed, Reese gazes softly at his old friend and offers a casual, gentle greeting. Looking down at the motionless figure, the elf quietly notes how incredibly peaceful the old man looks. Hugging his child close, Gallius agrees that Grillet's calm demeanor is a far cry from 2 years ago, having finally had the time to talk everything out. He admits that he used to fumble through his duties as a lord before Grillet properly taught him everything he needed to know. Holding Vice tightly against his chest, the tearful man expresses overwhelming gratitude for having his son in his life now. As the young boy innocently asks why his father is crying, Gallius sincerely thanks Reese for gifting them this precious time. Blushing with a mix of sorrow and nostalgia, Reese reflects that the past 2 years felt like nothing more than a fleeting moment. Watching Minori and Silpha stand strong together, he realizes that everyone else in the family has already accepted the inevitable end. Staring down at the fading man in absolute silence, Reese internally wonders if his dear friend is truly satisfied with his life. Gently grasping the old man's frail hand, Reese feels the life quietly waning away despite the presence of a faint pulse. A vivid memory of a boisterous, smiling Grillet flashes through Reese's mind as he realizes this man was his very first friend in this new world. Tightening his grip on the withering fingers, the young elf solemnly wonders when the vibrant man's hands became so terribly small. Breaking the heavy silence, Reese turns back toward the family and asks Gallius if he can be just a little bit selfish. Breaking the heavy silence, Reese turns to the grieving man and softly calls out Gallius's name. Looking up with a serious expression, the young elf asks if he can be just a little bit selfish. Wiping her tears, Silpha warmly insists that they would gladly accept absolutely anything he wants. Staring solemnly out the window, Reese gently requests to speak with Grillet one last time. Utterly stunned by the impossible request, an emotional Minori asks how he could possibly talk with her father. Grasping at a tiny sliver of hope, Gallius desperately asks if Reese truly has a way to do such a miraculous thing. Reese explains that he plans to use an ancient necromancy technique that governs the cycle of life and death itself. Lowering his gaze, he humbly requests just a little bit of time to prepare the complex spell. Curious about his master's intentions, Minori asks what he would even say if he succeeds in bringing Grillet back. Pausing thoughtfully, Rhys admits he would simply thank his old friend for everything. Trailing off, he tightly shuts his eyes and begins focusing his immense magical power. Surging with dark, otherworldly energy, Rhys claps his hands together and summons a massive, glowing sphere. A colossal, ethereal door violently bursts open upon the hillside, leaving the young elf completely awestruck. Countless glowing souls pour out of the terrifying gate to the afterlife, swirling frantically around the dumbfounded onlookers. Standing tall amidst the swirling spirits, a fully materialized Grillet appears and prompts a shocked gasp from Rhys. Hoisting his massive sword over his shoulder, the confused warrior chuckles and points out that it isn't quite his time to be there yet. Sweating nervously, Rhys quickly interrupts the old man and urges him to cut right to the chase before his few minutes run out. He frantically explains that he used a highly restricted magic to temporarily materialize Grillet's soul in the physical world. He reveals that the ancient technique, necrosis, was once used to temporarily summon the very first Demon Lord and Dragon King. Clenching his fist with burning determination, Rhys swears that he will eventually find a way to permanently revive his dear friend. Pleading with the older man, Rhys begs Grillet to patiently wait in the afterlife until that promised day arrives. Throwing his head back, Grillet bursts into booming laughter and warmly teases Rhys for being capable of absolutely anything. Stepping forward with a reassuring smile, Grillet gently tells the young elf that everything is perfectly fine. Looking down with immense gratitude, the old warrior sincerely thanks Rhys for coming all this way just to see him off. Reflecting on his long life, Grillet proudly declares that he successfully protected Fort Kukure and spent his final days surrounded by his loving family. Staring happily into the starry sky, he smiles brightly and states that seeing his cute grandson left him with absolutely no regrets. Pausing slightly, Grillet admits that his one final, lingering attachment is his worry regarding the talking beasts and demons. Staring intensely at the horizon, he warns that humanity will be trampled in an instant if the Demon Lord revives and starts a rampage. Reaching out to grab Rhys's shoulder, the fierce warrior begs his master to promise him that he will find the true hero. Glaring with unwavering conviction, Grillet demands that Rhys guide the hero to completely defeat the Demon Lord. Staring deeply into the young elf's eyes, Grillet solemnly declares that Rhys is the only person he can trust with the entire future of humanity. Overwhelmed by the heavy burden, Rhys swallows his hesitation and firmly promises to fulfill his friend's final wish. A soft, relieved smile stretches across Grillet's face as he gently rests his hand against the young boy's head. Smiling confidently, Rhys assures the old man that he has nothing to worry about as long as Gallius is protecting the fort. Looking down at his own hand, Rhys quietly notes that he can still feel the faint sensation of his friend's touch. A wave of nostalgia washes over Grillet as he fondly remembers the very first time he grabbed his master's hand. Staring in pure wonder, the old warrior notes that Rhys's hand hasn't changed a single bit since the day they first met. Gently gripping the small hand, Grillet marvels at how pale and smooth the elven skin has remained after all these years. Realizing that elves don't start aging until they hit 800, Grillet comically connects the dots and freaks out over how many centuries his master has actually lived. Sharing one final, quiet moment, Grillet gazes warmly down at his eternal friend as his time in the physical world slowly comes to an end. Staring solemnly, Rhys quietly reflects that his own long life must have seemed like a mere flash to the dying man. Gripping the fragile fingers, the elf hesitates to share his own thoughts while Grillet sincerely thanks him for his tears. Passing on a message from Gallius, Grillet gently tells his master that he can finally rest and offers his profound gratitude. Flashing a bright, unwavering smile, the old warrior enthusiastically accepts his fate. Promising to find some delicious sake, Grillet vows to wait on the other side but warmly warns Rhys not to visit too soon. The very next morning, the great war god who protected Fort Kukure from magic beasts for 20 years passes away at the age of 58. Surrounded by his weeping family, the beloved lord peacefully draws his last breath in his sleep. Sitting alone on a high wall overlooking the city, Rhys notes that his friend experienced as good a death as any mortal could hope for. The quiet, bustling city carries on below, entirely unaware of the monumental loss of its protector. Watching the peaceful streets, Minori reflects on how incredibly short 2 years truly is. Staring at his own smooth palm, Rhys vividly recalls the stark contrast of Grillet's wrinkled hand and the old man's lingering words about how elves never change. Startled from his heavy thoughts, Rhys turns sharply as Minori suddenly calls out his name. Looking deeply concerned, the young girl gently asks if he wants to come inside and rest. Gazing down at her warm, youthful skin, Rhys somberly realizes that one day her hand will inevitably suffer the exact same fate. Ignoring her worried inquiry, he silently walks past the confused girl while she asks if he is okay. Brushing off her concern, he softly thanks her and insists that he is perfectly fine now. Walking away from the estate, Reese internally mourns the devastating loss of the very first friend he made in this new world. Stopping in his tracks, he calls out to Minori and fiercely swears that he will absolutely defeat the Demon Lord. Glaring into the distance, he vows to accomplish this goal even if it takes centuries and forces him to fight the fully revived Demon Lord without the fated hero. Flashing a determined gaze, he notes that stubbornly pursuing a goal for ages is his absolute strongest trait. Lowering his eyes, he silently admits to himself that he still lacks the crucial brave factor needed to actually pull off such a monumental feat. Rushing excitedly after him, Minori beams with unwavering loyalty and happily promises to follow him wherever he goes. Marching forward, Reese silently vows to inherit his late friend's legacy and protect the very place the old man guarded with his life. Gripping his fist tightly, the young elf resolves to make Grillet's cherished sanctuary a part of his own destiny. 1 year later, Reese sits at a rustic table and eagerly anticipates the arrival of Minori Special Number 48. Bursting with pride, Minori dramatically presents a mouth-watering dish of farese steamed in white wine. Savoring the delicious bite, Reese praises her rapidly improving skills while she happily admits to using every trick in the book to make him enjoy her cooking. Reese cautiously asks if it is really okay to stop naming her dishes after Silpha, given the older woman's past instructions. Smiling softly, Minori explains that her late mentor taught her to wholeheartedly support the people she cares about most. Brimming with confidence, she eagerly plans to show off her massive collection of original recipes when she eventually reunites with Silpha in the afterlife. A pair of quiet tombstones stand side by side, marking the tragic reality that Silpha passed away exactly 1 year after her beloved husband. Flexing her culinary muscles, Minori playfully tells him to look forward to her next meal while Reese cheerfully agrees. Later that night, the young girl sleeps soundly with soft, rhythmic breaths filling the quiet room. Watching her peaceful face, Reese reflects on how the tiny child he saved will already be turning 22 by the end of the year. Gazing softly at her resting form, he silently laments the terrifying, incredible speed at which humanity moves forward. Clenching his teeth, he bitterly admits to himself that he simply does not want to accept that harsh reality when it comes to Minori. Suddenly jolting upright in his bed, the young elf snaps his attention toward the window as he detects a distant battle. Peeking through the wooden shutters, he utilizes his appraisal magic to analyze several chaotic mana signatures rampaging deep within the forest. A massive, invisible shockwave ripples violently against the shimmering barrier protecting their hidden home. Widening his glowing eyes, Reese unleashes a blinding pulse of raw magical energy into the night. Staring intensely out the window into the dark night, Reese suddenly breaks the silence and declares that he finally found them. Confused by his sudden intensity, a startled Minori gently asks her master what is going on. Spinning around with wild excitement, Reese practically shouts that he finally located their target. Flashing a massive grin at the bewildered girl, he triumphantly announces that he found the one possessing the legendary brave factor. Half a day earlier, a heavily burdened young man gasps for breath as he slowly trudges through a rugged mountain pass. An arrogant adventurer glares back at the struggling boy and angrily demands to know why they have to look after such a pathetic weakling. Sneering viciously, the leader threatens to completely ditch the boy the second they get a chance if he cannot even carry their luggage. Ignoring the harsh insults, the exhausted boy desperately huffs for air while buckling under the weight of a massive, towering backpack. Glancing back with pure disgust, the leader scoffs that the boy perfectly proves why people unable to use magic are completely useless. Pointing a threatening finger, the cruel adventurer swears he will make the boy repay them in full if he drops a single piece of gear. Gritting his teeth through the agonizing pain, the young man groans softly while his so-called comrades march lazily ahead. Trudging forward under the crushing weight, the determined boy repeatedly mutters to himself that this torture is simply part of his training. Desperately calling out to Luke, Jin begs the party to stop and warns that traversing the forest at night is far too dangerous. He frantically suggests setting up camp since it's safe during the day, noting recent reports of a mysterious mist and unusually strong monsters appearing at night. Rolling her eyes, a mage named Solala mocks Jin for being a pain and agrees with Luke's desire to finish the quest and rush home. Annoyed by the whining, Luke commands the boy to shut up while Jin desperately tries to offer a safer route using a hand-drawn map. Exuding pure arrogance, Luke reminds the group that they are a highly capable B-rank party. Sweating under the harsh glare, Jin listens helplessly as Luke cruelly tells the magicless supporter to just keep his mouth shut. Ignoring all warnings, the confident leader orders the group to march straight into the darkening woods. Trudging forward with a heavy pack, Jin tries to reassure himself that everything will be fine as long as he focuses on his assigned tasks. Glaring into the shadows, the young boy firmly vows to overcome his weakness and grow stronger. Deep into the night, the party sprints frantically through the trees as a heavily burdened Jin struggles to keep pace. Cursing in terror, Jin watches as ominous, shadowy figures rapidly close the distance behind them. Panicking as the pursuit intensifies, someone frantically screams to know what kind of freaky creatures are hunting them. Staring back in pure horror, the group realizes the pursuing beasts are absolutely no ordinary monsters. Trembling, Luke tries to rationalize the situation by claiming the magic snake and boar should merely be C-rank threats. Spinning around in desperation, the twin mags unleash a barrage of magical spells directly at their pursuers. The powerful elemental attacks strike the beasts dead on, erupting into a massive and blinding explosion of force. As the smoke clears, the adventurers are absolutely stunned to see their magic did absolutely no damage to the creatures. Trembling in sheer disbelief, they realize that only A-rank monsters or higher possess the terrifying ability to absorb magic. A tearful mage screams in panic, crying out that both her and her sister's spells are completely useless against the threat. Sweating profusely, Luke fiercely insists they are a B-rank party while Carol hysterically begs everyone to run away. Sprinting for their lives, the panicked adventurers wail that the relentless beasts refuse to stop chasing them. Glancing back over his shoulder, a terrified party member questions the horrifying black aura radiating from the monsters. Realizing the dark aura is actually dense mana, Carol deduces these are the exact weirdly strong monsters Jin warned them about. Glaring furiously, Luke commands her to shut up as she cries that they should have listened to the boy in the first place. Pointing an accusing finger, the angry leader reminds Carol that she willingly brushed off the warnings earlier too. Sobbing uncontrollably, Carol wails that they are all going to get caught and die at this rate. Gritting his teeth in furious desperation, Luke listens as a weeping Carol calls out his name for a solution. She begs him to find a way back to the fortress, warning that their dire situation is only going to get worse. A sinister shadow falls over Luke's face as he coldly mutters that it is not over just yet. Flashing a dark expression, the cruel leader decides it is finally time to write off their unprofitable asset. He casually rationalizes that they can simply buy new luggage, sending a wave of absolute shock through his confused comrades. Flashing a psychotic grin, Luke silences Carol's protests by asking if she would prefer to take the boy's place as bait. Desperately trying to save everyone, Jin points out a small animal path they could all use to safely escape the monsters. Sneering viciously down at him, Luke asks the magicless boy what the hell he even lives for. He cruelly reveals he only brought Jin along because they grew up together, openly mocking his pathetic dream of becoming an adventurer. Pulling out a highly valuable magic tool, Luke complains about wasting it while a terrified Jin weakly calls his name. Smiling with sadistic glee, Luke tells the doomed boy he can at least be useful to them in the very end. He aggressively invokes the tool's power, unleashing a devastating combination of advanced water and earth fusion magic. The spell violently crashes into Jin, crushing him under his massive pack as he screams in agony about his sinking legs. Holding a glowing orb, Luke carelessly turns his back on the trapped boy while Jin desperately asks what he is doing. Trembling with fear, the twin mags nervously agree to the sick plan of using the worthless guy as bait so they can escape. Weeping uncontrollably as they abandon their comrade, the terrified girls scream that they just want to go home. Reaching out helplessly from the mud, Jin watches as a horrified Carol turns away and sprints into the darkness. The three surviving adventurers disappear into the night, completely abandoning the crippled boy to be slaughtered. Gripping the dirt with bloody fingers, a devastated Jin realizes they could have all made it out together if they had just listened. Lying helpless in the dirt, the young boy reflects on the painful reality of his inability to use magic. Gazing into the distance, he remembers how his lifelong dream had always been to become a powerful adventurer who could save others. He fondly imagines a life spent traveling the world, defeating dangerous monsters, and protecting the innocent smiles of the people. Despite his tragic lack of talent, he has always deeply believed that being an adventurer was the absolute coolest path in life. Staring at his calloused hands, he bitterly laments that magic is an absolute requirement for adventurers and he simply cannot wield it. He reflects on how humans naturally develop magic by age 5 and hit their absolute peak around 20 years old. Recalling his past, he notes how every single childhood friend he partied up with quickly grew overwhelmingly strong at a terrifying speed. Staring hopelessly at the ground, he painfully admits that nothing ever changed for his own stagnant growth. Refusing to completely surrender his dream, he desperately trained with his sword to compensate for his devastating lack of magical talent. Pushing himself to the absolute limit, he worked tirelessly to gather information so he could still be useful to his friends. Gripping the earth, he cries out that his curse prevents him from even using the basic magic tools that all of humanity relies on. Trapped in a world where magic dictates everything, the crippled boy feels completely forbidden from holding onto any hopes or dreams. As the terrifying shadows of the monsters loom over him, he weakly reaches out and whispers his final wish. Staring death in the face, the battered boy sadly admits he just wanted to be a cool adventurer like the rest of them. A massive, explosive sphere of dark energy suddenly violently erupts out of nowhere and blasts the monstrous snake away. Invoking the powerful Whirl Schwartz spell, a mysterious savior arrives in the nick of time to unleash a devastating strike. A blinding pillar of fiery destruction engulfs the battlefield as a fierce warrior steps up to crush the remaining threats. Glaring at the scorched earth, Minori loudly announces that she and her master made it just in time to intercept the black flames. Flashing a confident smile, Reese notes how incredibly close the boy came to meeting his tragic end. Noticing a second beast charging forward, Minori fiercely declares that she will personally handle the rampaging magic boar. The massive, menacing boar snorts viciously and digs its hooves into the dirt as it prepares to trample the new challengers. Raising her weapon with absolute authority, Minori channels an overwhelming combination of ultimate fire and wind fusion magic. She seamlessly invokes the legendary Dragonia spell, unleashing a torrential storm of elemental fury. The resulting shockwave obliterates the surrounding terrain and completely vaporizes the ferocious beast in an instant. Looking up in absolute shock, the battered Jin gasps in awe as he realizes his savior is an actual elf. Analyzing the battlefield, Reese calmly notes that it has been a very long time since they encountered monsters capable of surviving a direct spell. Turning his attention back to his student, the young elf cheerfully declares that this is a perfect training opportunity for Minori. Reese confidently challenges the eager girl to defeat the surviving magic snake using a maximum of 5 ultimate spells. Glancing down at the bewildered boy, Reese casually assures Minori that she does not need to worry about the bystander's safety. Smiling warmly at the injured boy, the powerful elf promises to personally protect him during the ensuing clash. Watching the interaction, a fiercely jealous Minori silently pouts and wishes her master would protect her instead. Kneeling down beside Jin, Reese accurately deduces that the boy was completely abandoned by his comrades solely because of his lack of magic. Shaking his head in disbelief, Reese mocks the boy's former party as utterly blind fools. The wise elf notes that Jin has constantly trained his body and mind to absolute perfection in order to overcome his magical handicap. Staring deeply into the boy's soul, Reese praises him for never giving up and always believing that his magic would someday awaken. Utterly stunned by this perfect analysis, Jin weakly looks up and asks how the stranger could possibly know his deepest struggles. Pointing gently at the young man, Reese confidently declares that such unbreakable perseverance is exactly what defines true greatness. Flashing a reassuring smile, the young elf firmly states that Jin's relentless spirit is precisely what makes a true hero. Channeling his immense power, Reese casts the ultimate recovery spell Psi Ralpha to completely heal the boy's severe wounds. Offering a warm, gentle hand to the stunned boy, Reese expresses his profound relief at finally finding the one possessing the legendary brave factor. History would later record that the 17-year-old Jin Fritz experienced his ultimate turning point the fateful night he met an elf. Staring in pure awe, Jin realizes Reese healed his severely injured legs instantly without even using a single potion. Sitting comfortably on the forest floor, the stunned boy deduces his savior must truly be one of the legends. Annoyed by the situation, Reese complains about the party making one member carry all the heavy luggage while Jin wonders if he is a legendary elf. Reese gently praises the boy for managing to keep pace on the uneven forest roads while lugging such a massive bag. Looking curiously at the young supporter, the elf asks if Jin has been doing all this grueling work without magic his entire life. Jin sadly admits he was born without mana, noting that normal people simply use magic tools to carry heavy loads. Reese confirms the tragic reality, stating he cannot feel any mana waves emanating from the boy, meaning even basic magic tools are useless to him. Examining Jin's well-trained arms and legs, the elf notes the boy must have worked incredibly hard to compensate for his lack of mana. Gripping his arm tightly, Jin tearfully laments that he wouldn't have been abandoned by his comrades if only he were stronger. Reese silently observes that instead of blaming the companions who left him for dead, the noble boy only blames his own lack of strength. Glaring with sudden intensity, Reese realizes this exact mindset is what will bring the legendary hero factor to its true potential. Standing tall over the confused boy, the confident elf declares that Jin has the talent to become a strong adventurer and vows to make him one. Lowering his gaze, Reese adds that he won't bother the boy if he has already lost his drive to pursue his dream. Extending a warm hand, the elf invites Jin to take it if he still deeply desires to become even a little bit stronger. Looking up with renewed hope, Jin vividly recalls his lifelong dream to become a strong adventurer who protects people's smiles. Tears streaming down his face, the battered boy desperately cries out that he truly wants to become stronger. Reaching forward with all his might, the weeping boy passionately screams his desire to grow strong. Grasping the boy's hand firmly, Reese pulls him up with a reassuring smile as a new bond is forged. Jin stares at the elf in absolute wonder while Reese internally marvels at the amazing resolve both these young kids possess. Formalizing their partnership, they proudly introduce themselves to each other while Reese humbly reflects that he was nothing like them in his past life. Minori urgently interrupts the moment, screaming a warning that the surviving magic boar is charging straight for Reese. As the massive beast snorts and hardens its fur into sharp spikes, Reese calmly identifies the creature's hardening magic. Stepping forward to meet the charge, Reese counters the beast's hardening magic with his own beast fist and enchants it with crackling thunder magic. Lightning surges violently around his arm as the elf pulls back his glowing, devastating thunder fist. Flashing a confident smirk, Reese instructs Jin to stay back and closely watch the ensuing battle. Sprinting forward with blinding speed, the fierce elf unleashes his strike and yells that this overwhelming power is what 100 years of training gets you. The electrified punch slams brutally into the massive boar, completely shattering its defense and sending the heavy beast flying backward. Reese flashes a triumphant grin as raw lightning surges through the impact zone, thoroughly obliterating the monster. Jin watches the spectacle in absolute shock, suddenly recalling that fairy tales claim elves can only use basic healing magic. Still reeling from the incredible display, Jin listens as Reese casually suggests they go retrieve Minori. A sinister, swirling black mass suddenly manifests in the sky, shocking Reese as a dark voice greets them. The ominous void floats silently between the trees, exuding a dense and terrifying aura of dark energy. Recognizing the voice from Grillet's altered memories, Reese glares at the anomaly and demands to know what it is doing here. The dark sphere violently erupts with power, instantly obliterating the nearby magic beast in a terrifying burst of energy. Shielding his face from the intense miasma, Reese urgently checks to see how Jin is handling the crushing pressure. Trembling violently under the overwhelming aura, a terrified Jin barely manages to stay conscious on his feet. Stepping protectively in front of the boy, Reese confidently greets the dark entity with a fearless smile. Staring down the swirling void, Reese calmly states that he clearly remembers the entity's distinct voice. Glaring sharply at the anomaly, the elf deduces that this is the exact same being who attacked Grillet at Fort Kukure 10 years ago. Noting its much fainter appearance, Reese questions if the entity has been trapped in this strange, incorporeal form using dark magic. Deep inside a mausoleum in the Holy Forest Litor, a dark entity reveals that its soul was sealed away. The entity explains it only exists now thanks to mana from the Demon Lord subordinate, remaining trapped in this pitiful vessel. Reese vividly recalls reading that incredibly powerful divine beasts are sealed inside that exact mausoleum. Putting the pieces together, Reese realizes the soul inside the magic boar must belong to one of those legendary divine beasts. Digging deeper, the elf deduces that the Demon Lord subordinate must possess enormous mana to forcibly link a divine beast's soul to a mere monster. The dark entity casually mentions hearing that the Demon Lord's grand resurrection is scheduled to happen in exactly 3 years. Snorting violently, the boar eagerly anticipates the resurrection so it will no longer have to suffer in such an uncomfortable body. Flashing a knowing smirk, Reese points out that being trapped in a magic beast usually means the soul's existence is rapidly waning. He confidently explains that the incorporeal soul is being physically influenced by the boar vessel, meaning the entity is dangerously close to becoming a mindless beast. A sudden, explosive shockwave violently erupts from the boar, forcing Reese to swiftly grab Jin and dodge the impact. Shielding the terrified boy, Reese urgently checks to ensure Jin survived the sudden blast. Reese calmly observes that the magic beast is acting awfully willing to divulge highly classified information. A stunned Jin asks when Reese cast his spell, to which the elf proudly explains he simply used a powerful illusion magic known as Okino's. As the illusion continues to trick the beast, Jin sweats profusely and mutters that elves are absolutely crazy. Clenching his fists, Jin desperately tries to formulate a plan to exploit the divine beast's weakness despite its overwhelming power. The young boy points out that the beast's mana could run out at any moment, a tactical observation that Reese happily confirms. The boar fiercely declares it must persevere and follow orders since its life is entirely in the hands of its absent masters. Activating his appraisal magic, Reese scans the boar's status and uncovers its true name as Vritra, currently subjugated by Wava Karma. Connecting the dots, Reese recognizes Wava Karma as the acting supervisor of the fearsome Demon Lord army. Utterly shocked, the dark entity stammers in panic as it demands to know how the elf discovered its true name. Flashing a DV smile, Reese explains that he can easily extract massive amounts of information from weaker targets using his appraisal magic. Extending a casual hand toward the trembling beast, the confident elf offers to make a mutually beneficial deal. Reese proposes using his immense magic to grant the divine beast its original, powerful body back. Sweating heavily, Jin frantically points out that giving a monster its body back is impossible for an elf, while Reese simply demands the beast stop hunting adventurers in exchange. Summoning a massive, blinding sphere of raw magic, Reese proudly asks if this is enough mana to sustain the original body. Squealing in absolute terror, the boar freaks out over the elf effortlessly producing mana on par with Wava Karma. Watching the boar completely lose its mind from the shock, Reese casually notes that this display is only a mere fifth of his total mana capacity. Overwhelmed by the elf's sheer power, the beast nervously asks if Reese really won't demand anything else in return. Staring up at the sky with renewed hope, the entity softly wonders if it will truly be able to fly freely once again. Reese promises not to meddle in the beast's life as long as it avoids causing trouble, though he casually asks for a chat every century or so. Flashing a brilliant smile, the young elf finalizes the deal while the beast fiercely swears on its life to uphold its end of the bargain. A massive, blinding pillar of energy erupts into the sky as the dark magic radically reshapes the beast's physical form. A towering, magnificent dragon emerges from the light, laughing triumphantly as Jin screams in sheer terror at its imposing size. Checking his appraisal window to confirm the successful physical body creation, Reese cheerfully asks the newly restored ancient dragon how it feels. Spreading its massive wings, Vritra excitedly declares that it can finally fly wherever it wants in its ideal body. Reese warns the dragon that it will take time for its soul to fully root in the new body, but jokingly adds he doesn't plan on dying for the next 9 centuries anyway. Startled by the elf's incredibly long lifespan, the dragon gratefully accepts the offer of future mana top-ups. Brushing off the massive favor, Reese playfully asks the dragon to share any delicious fruits it finds during its travels. Vritra notes that elves are truly odd creatures but offers its sincere gratitude before asking for its savior's name. Smiling brightly, Reese Klein proudly declares himself an elf who fled his cramped little world to live freely on the outside. Recognizing their shared desire for absolute freedom, Vritra chuckles and declares that they are truly birds of a feather. Fist-bumping the colossal beast, Reese fiercely swears a lifelong friendship that the dark dragon gladly accepts. Preparing to take flight, the ancient dragon's massive eye suddenly glows as it offers a mysterious token of its profound gratitude. A sudden, blinding pulse of dark magic violently washes over the startled elf as he wonders what just happened. Spreading its magnificent wings, Vritra promises to visit Reese Klein again after taking a triumphant flight around the entire world. Reese happily watches the massive beast soar into the twilight sky and cheerfully bids his new companion farewell. Staring at the empty horizon, the young elf quietly marvels at how incredibly fast the dragon completely disappeared from sight. Smiling warmly, Reese reflects on the absolute joy of finally making a friend in this new world who shares a similarly long lifespan. Breaking the quiet moment, an incredibly excited Minori sprints up to announce her flawless victory over the magic snake. Reese proudly praises his student's amazing growth, genuinely impressed that she effortlessly defeated the beast with plenty of mana to spare. Watching from the sidelines, an absolutely awestruck Jin deduces the young girl must be at least an A-rank adventurer to pull off such an incredible feat. Snapping his attention to the bewildered boy, Reese fiercely scolds Jin for standing around slack-jawed when there is no time to waste. A horrified Minori gasps in pure shock as Reese solemnly reveals that the Demon Lord will fully revive in exactly 3 short years. Turning back to the trembling boy, the serious elf commands Jin to listen closely to some incredibly vital information. Reese completely shatters the boy's reality by revealing that Jin possesses the dormant brave factor, making him the only person capable of defeating the Demon Lord. Gesturing dramatically toward his prodigy student, Reese fiercely vows to train Jin until he is even stronger than Minori within a single year. Utterly overwhelmed by the insane declaration, the exhausted boy can only offer a blank, breathless stare of absolute confusion. The incredibly grueling and overwhelming operational training officially begins for the determined young boy. Closing her eyes in deep concentration, Minori smoothly enchants her wooden sword with ultimate fire magic. She swings the burning blade with terrifying force, unleashing the devastating Valhalic strike right at her junior. Bracing himself for their 180-second sparring match, a battered Jin fiercely welcomes her all-out attack. Exactly 182 days earlier, the peaceful morning sun shines over the estate as the very first day of training commences. Standing outside, Jin looks completely bewildered as Reese cheerfully announces they will be training with wooden swords. Stepping closer, an intense Minori explains that the weapon is actually special training equipment personally crafted by their master. Realizing the immense value of the gift, Jin eagerly accepts the wooden sword with profound gratitude. Smiling warmly, Reese notes that while the boy possesses absolutely no actual mana, he still has the necessary vessel to hold it. The wise elf uses a simple analogy, explaining that the body's mana vessel acts like a bucket while the mana itself is the water inside. He demonstrates how constantly emptying the bucket allows the vessel to grow slightly over time as the mana naturally regenerates. Jin excitedly points out that he read that exact concept in a magic theory book, leaving both elves thoroughly impressed by his knowledge. Flashing a wicked grin, Reese reveals he plans to put Jin through the exact same terrifying training regimen that once left Minori completely paralyzed for a week. Trembling slightly at the horrifying prospect, a sweating Jin raises his hand to ask a very important question. He nervously points out the obvious flaw in the plan, asking where he is supposed to get mana if he literally produces none. With a massive, cheerful smile, Reese casually states that he will simply pour his own mana directly into Jin's empty vessel until it overflows. He explains that the wooden sword is secretly a magic tool designed to absorb mana, forcing Jin to learn how to properly channel the foreign energy. Staring deeply into the boy's eyes, Reese promises that following these exact steps will rapidly and violently expand his mana vessel. The elf explains this method bypasses natural regeneration, simulating how normal people instinctively learn to use mana from birth. Utterly overwhelmed by the insane strategy, Jin nervously grips the hilt of his new weapon while processing the absurd information. Reese elaborates that since Jin's body lacks the ability to produce mana, it doesn't need to waste time resting to regenerate any. He points out that this completely eliminates the annoying downtime they previously suffered when waiting for Minori's reserves to slowly recharge. Formulating his brutal plan, Reese intends to exhaust Jin's vessel daily, instantly cure his physical fatigue with magic, and forcefully refill him for an entire year. The elf excitedly calculates that this relentless cycle will eventually mutate Jin's mana vessel to 30 times its current microscopic size before his brave factor awakens. Gripping the heavy wooden sword, a highly intimidated Jin silently wonders if he can truly survive such a monstrous ordeal. Sensing the boy's hesitation, Reese gently brings up their previous conversation regarding the legendary brave factor. Staring at his sword, Jin solemnly recalls that the person possessing this specific factor is the only one capable of defeating the Demon Lord. Reese respectfully acknowledges the immense suffering and humiliation Jin has endured his entire life due to his magical handicap. However, the elf firmly declares that to a discerning eye, the boy harbors an absolutely terrifying amount of untapped potential. The master solemnly calls out the boy's full name, letting the heavy reality of his destiny sink in. Extending a hand of absolute trust, Reese assumes Jin hasn't changed his mind since he desperately begged to become stronger. Flashing a fearless, cocky smirk, Jin proudly declares that his absolute best trait is his stubborn refusal to ever give up. Watching the boy's unwavering resolve, Reese and Minori silently acknowledge the terrifying reality that they only have 3 years before the Demon Lord revives. Despite the extreme lack of time, Minori glares fiercely ahead and decides she is willing to bet everything on this magicless boy. Snapping back to the explosive present, Minori unleashes a massive, roaring vortex of flames and vows to go all out. Squaring his battle stance, a fiercely determined Jin screams for her to bring it on. A blazing, high-speed clash erupts between the two students, marking the explosive start of their 180-second match. Watching calmly from the sidelines, Reese notes that the match count perfectly matches the exact number of days since Jin's hellish training began. Screaming with raw effort, Jin charges fearlessly through the scorching heat toward his overwhelmingly powerful senior. Focusing his entire soul into the blade, the young boy desperately attempts to become one with his sword to survive the crushing impact. Gripping his wooden sword tightly, Jin concentrates fiercely to feel the flow of mana. Minori unleashes a vicious downward slash, forcing the young boy to brace for the heavy impact. A sudden pulse of energy interrupts the clash, leaving both warriors completely stunned as the jammer unexpectedly goes off. Staring wide-eyed at his weapon, Jin realizes with sheer disbelief that the magic tool actually activated. Lowering her gaze, Minori calmly praises his effort before issuing a stern warning. Glaring sharply through her bangs, the experienced warrior coldly states that he still has absolutely no chance. Unleashing a terrifying wave of dark flames, she blasts the young boy backward with overwhelming force. Struggling through the agonizing pain, the battered boy desperately tries to stand back up and insists he can still fight. Stepping in, Reese gently stops the boy and warns that pushing his limits will only cause unnecessary strain since he only gets healed once a day. Channeling his immense power, the elf casually casts a glowing recovery spell to soothe the boy's battered body. Realizing the massive implications of his training, a starry-eyed Jin excitedly interrupts to ask about his sudden progress. Trembling with overwhelming emotion, the young boy tearfully asks if he actually just cast magic for the very first time. Flashing a bright smile, Reese happily confirms the achievement and praises Jin for his grueling 6 months of hard work. Bursting with renewed energy, the eager boy instantly sprints off to practice his swings and tackle his stamina training. Chuckling at the boy's boundless enthusiasm, the young elf suddenly feels a gentle tug on his cloak. Turning his attention to his senior student, Reese warmly praises Minori for her incredible recovery speed during the spar. Blushing furiously under the praise, Minori flashes a bright smile and proudly declares that her junior is still light years away from beating her. Watching her adorable reaction, Reese silently notes her sudden shift in demeanor and decides that her cuteness makes everything perfectly fine. Formulating his next tactical move, the master realizes it is finally time to start the harsh training required to awaken the boy's dormant brave factor. He reflects on the ancient legend, deducing that the hero can only awaken his true power by overcoming seemingly impossible trials alongside trusted companions. Stroking his chin in deep thought, the protective master worries about sending the inexperienced boy into deadly peril without his overpowered mentors hovering nearby. A sudden distraction breaks his concentration as Minori urgently points out something completely unexpected approaching from the sky. A massive, shadowy dragon swoops down from the clouds and booms a villainous laugh to announce its grand return. Staring wide-eyed at the terrifying beast, Reese completely freezes in absolute shock at the sudden, overwhelming entrance. Recognizing the massive creature, the stunned elf instantly identifies the ancient dragon he saved so long ago. Waving his arms frantically, Reese demands to know why the ancient beast returned centuries ahead of their agreed schedule. Puffing out its scaly chest, Vritra arrogantly dismisses the concern and brags about its perfectly full mana reserves. Leaning its massive head down, the imposing dragon excitedly urges its elven friend to check out its brand new trick. The young master's eye twitches in utter disbelief as the colossal beast suddenly begins to shrink right before him. Standing proudly in a ridiculously tiny, adorable form, the miniature dragon leaves both elves completely dumbfounded by its sudden transformation. Unable to resist the adorable sight, Minori eagerly pokes the squishy little dragon while it happily accepts the attention. Stroking his chin curiously, Reese correctly deduces that the ancient beast can freely alter its size solely because its brand new body is constructed entirely of his own mana. Brimming with excitement over their cute new guest, Minori happily rushes off to brew some tea and fetch her junior. Sitting comfortably on his shoulder, the tiny dragon listens as Reese casually asks for the real reason behind this surprisingly early visit. Glaring with sudden annoyance, the little beast complains that the outside world is currently crawling with incredibly obnoxious demons. Vritra grimly reveals that the growing hordes of magical beasts and demons are slowly accumulating dangerous miasma in preparation for their Dark Lord's imminent return. The ancient dragon nods seriously, reminding Reese that he already saw those exact horrific memories back at the fort. Crossing its tiny arms, the dragon casually announces its selfish plan to crash at the elf's hidden sanctuary until the outside chaos completely blows over. Throwing a tiny punch into the air, Vritra boldly declares it will help obliterate the demon lord just so it can finally get some proper sleep in a quiet world. Sighing heavily at the absolute misunderstanding, Reese flatly interrupts the hyped-up dragon to clarify that he is absolutely not the legendary hero destined to save the world. Glaring fiercely ahead, Minori confidently declares she is betting everything on the magicless kid her master found. The tiny dragon tilts its head in sheer confusion, questioning why she would do that when she is clearly so strong. Staring deeply at the young girl, Vritra asserts that she will remain vastly superior to the boy regardless of his awakened factor or magic. Sweating nervously, Reese frantically covers the tiny dragon's mouth and dismisses the creature's crazy ideas. Looking out over the training grounds, the elf calmly explains that humans grow at a terrifying pace and tells his companion to just wait and see. Later that evening, An utterly exhausted Jin mumbles in his sleep as he collapses after another brutal round of swing practice. Standing over the battered boy, Minori gently notes how incredibly fired up he is about his hellish training. She warmly hands him a steaming cup of potion-laced tea, warning the young hero that impatience will only dull his blade. The two warriors sit quietly together under the starry sky, taking a brief moment of respite from their grueling reality. Staring into his warm cup, Jin lowers his gaze and sadly admits that he simply cannot help his anxious feelings. He solemnly confesses that dark doubts keep creeping into his mind regarding his supposed destiny as the chosen hero. Gripping the cup tightly, the frustrated boy laments his incredibly slow progress and desperately wishes to quickly live up to Reese's massive expectations. Minori gently breaks his self-pity, curiously asking how he knows for sure that the hero from the fairy tales actually defeated the demon lord. Looking up in slight confusion, Jin quickly replies that he has read the famous story countless times since he was a little kid. Flashing a nostalgic, innocent smile, he explains how he always deeply admired the legendary hero for protecting everyone's smiles. Minori calmly points out the obvious truth that if the protagonist had failed, they would never have been called a hero in the first place. She patiently clarifies her point, leaving Jin slightly bewildered as she explains it isn't simply about a predestined hero winning. Staring confidently into the night, she asserts that whoever manages to defeat the great evil will retroactively earn the grand title of hero. Flashing a warm smile, she advises the boy to stop brooding over ancient legends and just focus on becoming the person he truly wants to be. Standing tall against the moonlight, Minori asks the young boy who he ultimately desires to become. Utterly awestruck by her profound perspective, Jin stares up at his senior and silently ponders her heavy question. Gathering his own courage, the curious boy turns the conversation around and asks what drives Minori to train so relentlessly. Minori explains that Reese solemnly swore to completely obliterate the demon lord no matter how many centuries it might take. A sweating Jin quickly realizes that if they fail, the immortal elf will simply outlive them and eventually find new companions to finish the mission. Lowering her eyes bitterly, Minori acknowledges the heartbreaking reality that an entire human life is merely a fleeting moment to an elf. She notes that her beloved master will undoubtedly cherish many different companions throughout his incredibly long past and future. Clenching her fists tightly, the young girl admits she finds that tragic truth absolutely frustrating. Glaring with fierce, burning determination, she declares her absolute refusal to leave their shared future in the hands of unknown successors. Looking back with a gentle smile, Minori vows to stay by her master's side and fight for him as long as she draws breath. Flashing a brilliant, cocky grin, she proudly deduces that everything will be perfectly fine if she just kills the demon lord herself and claims the hero title. Completely mesmerized by her unbreakable resolve, a smiling Jin earnestly tells his senior that she is incredibly cool. Exactly 1 year after his grueling training began, the sharp clang of wooden swords echoes through the field as Reese and Vritra quietly observe the sparring match. Swinging her glowing blade with terrifying intensity, Minori fiercely activates her advanced fire magic enchant to overwhelm her junior. Glaring back with absolute focus, Jin waits for the perfect moment and intensely declares that it is his time to strike. Channeling his hard-earned power, the young boy successfully activates his jammer spell as a magical circle materializes on his hilt. Refusing to let up the pressure, Minori rapidly re-enchants her blade and fiercely warns him that extinguishing her flames once means absolutely nothing. Meeting her ferocious strike head-on, Jin pushes back with all his might and vows not to let her succeed. Despite his desperate defense, the young boy silently realizes that his current power is simply not enough to settle the match. Gritting his teeth under the heavy pressure, Jin mentally admits that relying solely on his jammer spell won't be enough to defeat his formidable senior. Watching the intense clash, Vritra commends the magicless boy for mastering both swordplay and Reese's foreign mana in such a remarkably short period. Flashing a cocky smirk, Reese shrugs off the praise and reminds the dragon that he always knew humans possessed a terrifying growth rate. Leaning in with absolute confidence, the Elven Master deviously proposes a high-stakes bet regarding his student's potential. He cheerfully declares that if Jin's growth manages to genuinely surprise the ancient beast today, Vritra must grant him one unconditional favor. Narrowing its scaly eyes, the tiny dragon eagerly accepts the challenge while assuring that the terms will undoubtedly go both ways. Staring intently at the young warriors, Vritra silently wonders why humans waste their incredibly short 60-year lifespans forcing their way through such brutal struggles. Watching the sparks fly between the two determined youths, Reese softly deduces that their shared obsession with their dreams is what pushes them beyond their limits. Glancing sideways at the wise elf, the tiny dragon hums thoughtfully before speaking its mind. Vritra bluntly points out that Rhys thinks awfully like a human despite his immortal lifespan, a notion the elf quickly brushes off with a nervous sweat. Hiding his true origins, Rhys silently reflects on his past life as a human that tragically ended after a mere 30 years. Flashing a warm, nostalgic smile, the proud master gazes at his students and marvels at how beautifully they are shining. Back on the battlefield, Jin desperately cries out as he barely dodges another devastating strike from his relentless senior. Catching his breath, Jin confidently brags that he has finally picked up on her attack habits after surviving exactly 365 matches. Hovering eagerly above the action, Vritra enthusiastically praises the boy's evasion and prepares to watch the climax of the spar. Rhys frantically warns the tiny dragon not to fly too close to the dangerous clash, but the arrogant beast completely ignores him. Ignoring her junior's taunts, a fiercely serious Minori shuts her eyes and channels an overwhelming surge of ultimate fire magic. Diving fearlessly toward the explosive energy, Vritra happily rationalizes that it would be a total waste to watch such an epic clash from far away. Unleashing a roaring inferno, Minori swings her blade and summons a colossal, devastating fire tornado to completely engulf the battlefield. As the terrifying flames spiral violently out of control, Minori suddenly pales and realizes she accidentally used way too much power while Vritra screams in sheer terror. Flapping its tiny wings in absolute panic, the miniature dragon wails in horror as the searing vortex threatens to roast it alive. Sprinting desperately toward the blazing inferno, Jin stretches his hand out and screams the tiny dragon's name. Plunging himself directly into the path of destruction, the brave boy grips his sword and violently channels his entire mana vessel into a massive defensive burst. The ancient dragon's eyes widen in sheer disbelief as the magicless boy miraculously steps in to shield it from the catastrophic blast. With one monumental swing, Jin completely shatters the blazing tornado, leaving both his master and senior utterly stunned by the incredible display. Rushing frantically through the dispersing smoke, a panicked Minori screams for her friends while fearing the absolute worst. Bowing her head in frantic apology, she tearfully confesses that she lost her temper and used far too much magic, nearly turning their guest into a roasted snack. Crossing his arms with an "I told you so" attitude, Rhys thoroughly scolds the pouting dragon for recklessly ignoring his earlier warnings. Sighing heavily at the absolute chaos, the elven master shifts his gaze toward his panting student and quietly processes what just happened. Staring wide-eyed at his trembling hands, Jin slowly realizes that the overwhelming power he just unleashed was absolutely not his standard defensive spell. Fluttering safely to the boy's side, Vritra cheerfully notes that Jin has finally learned to harness true magic, officially admitting defeat in Rhys's bet. Utterly bewildered by the dragon's casual observation, Jin stammers in shock as the reality of finally wielding his own magic washes over him. Stepping forward with immense pride, Rhys confirms the awakening while a flustered Jin desperately tries to understand the foreign, incredible sensation pulsing through his body. Jin is stunned, stammering in disbelief as Rhys cheerfully points out that the boy just used magic entirely on his own. Taking on a teaching tone, Rhys explains that by far the most important aspect of casting magic is clearly picturing the desired effect. Utterly confused, Jin admits he has no idea if he actually pictured anything at all, prompting a curious Rhys to ask what was on his mind. Lowering his gaze, the young boy softly reveals that he simply wanted to save Vritra and felt his body move completely on its own. Rhys calmly deduces that this intense desire to save someone must have been exactly what formed the powerful shield. Pausing thoughtfully, the wise master suggests that the pure desire to protect others might actually be the true source of Jin's magical power. Shifting the focus, Rhys turns to his senior student and asks for her professional opinion on how the boy perfectly negated her all-out attack. Still reeling from the shock, Minori earnestly admits that his defensive block was an absolutely amazing and incredibly powerful spell. The narrator notes that today, on the momentous occasion of their 365th sparring match, a major milestone was finally reached. Standing tall and catching his breath, Jin marks a triumphant victory by being the very first to end a match standing completely upright against his fierce senior. Brimming with excitement as Vritra munches on snacks in the background, Rhys happily announces that Jin's next stage of training will officially begin tomorrow. The Elven Master proudly states that Jin's mana vessel has expanded incredibly since they started, meaning he is finally ready to awaken the dormant brave factor. Explaining the brutal next steps, Rhys declares that the young boy must throw himself into actual, life-threatening battles to trigger that legendary awakening. While Vritra comically steals food from Rhys's plate, the master formulates his own plan to start scouting for the future companions their hero will eventually need. Startled by the sudden change in plans, Jin urgently interrupts his master as Reese casually mentions that the boy will be hunting local monsters alongside Minori. Sweating nervously, Jin respectfully asks his master for permission to act completely alone and restart his journey as an independent adventurer. He acknowledges how selfish the request sounds, especially with dangerous beasts roaming around, but firmly states he wants to protect everyone and become a genuinely cool adventurer. Smiling brightly, Reese excitedly points out that this exact drive perfectly aligns with Jin figuring out who he truly wants to be. A flashback highlights Minori's previous profound advice, reminding Jin of the starry night she challenged him to envision his ideal self. Flashing a confident, unwavering smile, Jin firmly declares that stepping out on his own is the only way he will ever truly grow stronger. Chuckling bashfully, the young boy shyly admits he also feels like he is taking advantage of their endless hospitality by staying holed up in their safe haven. Staring solemnly at the determined boy, Reese silently reflects on how tragic it is that Jin still wants to be an adventurer despite being brutally betrayed by his former party. The protective master internally struggles, quietly admitting to himself that he would vastly prefer keeping his cherished students safely hidden away where he can always protect them. Letting go of his own selfish desires, Reese softly accepts the boy's decision and realizes this unyielding spirit might just be the core of Jin's true power. Raising a finger, the elven master agrees to the solo journey but sternly insists on adding one non-negotiable condition. Staring seriously at his student, Reese commands Jin to take the ancient dragon Vritra along as his traveling companion. Spitting out his drink in sheer panic, an absolutely horrified Vritra screams in protest while Jin looks equally bewildered by the sudden team-up. Thrashing around angrily, the tiny dragon furiously accuses Reese of making this ridiculous decision up on the spot without any prior warning. Leaning in with a devious, wicked smirk, Reese coldly reminds the panicking beast that he decisively lost their little bet earlier today. The master flawlessly recalls the exact terms, pointing out that Vritra was undeniably surprised by the boy's explosive growth during the sparring match. Ignoring the dragon's angry growls, Reese cheerfully suggests Vritra use this opportunity to study human life so it doesn't end up getting sealed away again for being a lazy shut-in. Bursting into boisterous laughter, Jin happily welcomes his new traveling buddy while a defeated Vritra angrily concedes and agrees to go along. Still slightly worried, Minori asks if this bizarre arrangement is really okay, to which Reese confidently replies that the dragon will serve as the absolute strongest bodyguard around. Flashing a sharp, calculating gaze, Reese explains that to fully awaken the brave factor, the hero absolutely requires 4 elemental companions by his side. He logically points out that since Vritra is a tremendously powerful dragon who wields supreme fire magic, the beast perfectly fills one of those crucial elemental slots. Watching the boy happily play with the grumbling dragon, Reese softly notes that Vritra might just become one of the hero's greatest, most reliable pillars in the future. Fully packed and ready for his grand adventure, Jin waves a cheerful goodbye to his mentors as he prepares to hit the road. Standing at the edge of the forest trail, Reese smiles warmly and loudly announces that he is expecting truly great things from his magicless prodigy. A picturesque view of the secluded mansion fills the background as Jin marches bravely forward to become the hero destined to protect everyone's smiles. Glancing sideways at her quiet master, Minori softly notes that Reese looks incredibly lonely watching his young student finally leave the nest. Watching Jin march off into the distance, Reese scratches his head and admits to Minori that he feels a deep sense of loneliness, though he quickly realizes there is much more to his heavy heart. He solemnly reflects on how Jin is an incredibly hardworking boy who genuinely desires to protect absolutely everyone he meets. Flashing a slightly self-deprecating smile, the elven master confesses that the dazzling young boy already feels like he has pulled a little bit ahead of him in life. Staring intensely at her master's vulnerable expression, Minori firmly vows that she will always stay right by his side. Reese silently agonizes over his internal fears, absolutely dreading the thought of having to properly confront Minori about their inevitably tragic future. Suddenly reaching out to tightly grasp her hands, the young elf shocks his student as he weakly admits that he has always been terrified. Lowering his gaze, he confesses his deep fear of outliving them all, knowing that existing on a completely different timeline guarantees they will brutally part ways one day. Gripping her fingers tighter, the immortal master bitterly admits that he has merely been running away from that inescapable reality. He solemnly realizes that while Minori and Jin constantly give their absolute all to live life to the fullest, he alone has been using his eternal lifespan as a cowardly excuse to stagnate. A wave of profound regret washes over him as he acknowledges that this cowardice perfectly mirrors how he completely wasted his previous human life. Lifting his head with a bright, genuine smile, the awakened master warmly thanks his beloved student for absolutely everything she has done for him. Pouring his true feelings out, Reese sincerely confesses his love for Minori and desperately declares his desire to truly live alongside her and the rest of their friends. Pulling the stunned girl into a deep, passionate embrace, the elven master fiercely vows to stay with them for as absolutely long as he can. Overwhelmed by the sudden confession, Minori buries her face into his chest and sobs tears of absolute joy, prompting a slightly confused reaction from her master. Gripping his clothes with unwavering devotion, the weeping girl promises to stay right by his side for as long as she draws breath. Holding her close against the twilight breeze, Reese silently swears to use absolutely every ounce of his overwhelming power to ensure they remain together forever. Gripping her wooden sword tightly, Minori runs up and calls out to her elven master. Reese turns and asks what she needs, prompting the young girl to ask if he has a moment to talk. She explains that she has been thinking about what they should do while waiting for Jin's brave factor to bloom. Blushing slightly, she admits she loved living alone with Reese but insists they cannot just sit around doing nothing. Staring out over the vast landscape, Reese seriously reveals he was thinking about heading into the demon realm known as Daos. Shocked by the name, Minori listens as Reese explains he saw the realm clearly within Vritra's ancient memories. He points toward the great circle forest of Vastira that currently surrounds them. Gesturing further, he explains that the demon king sleeps in the deepest parts of a place called Lastesia. Glaring seriously, Reese reveals that Daos is the demon world and that actual demons are hiding right inside their forest. Utterly bewildered, Minori questions this horrifying truth since demons have supposedly been extinct for ages. She points out they haven't sensed a single demonic presence, a fact Reese completely understands. The Elven Master explains the demons are actively using recognition inhibition magic exactly like the barrier hiding their own home. Stroking his chin in deep thought, Reese deduces that this powerful cloaking magic explains their hidden movements. He grimly admits that humanity is far behind the enemy because they know absolutely nothing about demon ecology or numbers. He adds that they do not even know the true goal of the slumbering demon king. Clenching his fist, Reese fiercely declares they must gather intel to ensure Jin's generation can actually defeat the great evil. Suddenly snapping his attention to his student, the elf calls out her name. Turning to face her completely, he softly asks if she will accompany him on this dangerous mission. Minori enthusiastically agrees while Reese notes that Jin and the Kukure Fortress warriors will be the ones fighting on the front lines in 3 years. Flashing a brilliant smile, Reese vows to uncover the enemy's secret so he can peacefully stay by Minori's side forever. Exactly 1 week later, the determined duo arrives at a seemingly empty spot to enact their plan. Looking around the vacant woods, a confused Minori questions the location while Reese insists they are in the right place. A sudden rustling sound breaks the silence, instantly putting the young warrior on high alert. Minori gasps in pure shock as the bisected half of a demonic beast suddenly phases right out of thin air. Confirming his suspicions, Reese casually notes that this invisible boundary is undeniably the entrance to the demon realm. Channeling his immense power, the Elven Master loudly invokes the Hellgate spell to shatter the illusion. The lush forest instantly melts away into a creepy, dead wasteland, leaving Minori completely speechless at the sudden shift in scenery. Analyzing the distortion, Reese deduces the enemy established a one-way barrier that traps anyone from walking inside normally. Minori immediately covers her mouth as a heavy, sickening atmosphere violently washes over her. Pulling his cloak over his nose, Reese warns his student that the air is saturated with incredibly dense miasma. Steeling their resolve against the toxic environment, the duo officially marches forward into the treacherous realm of Daos. 1 month later, the travelers wander through a ruined village filled with bizarre architecture and wonder why they haven't seen a single demon yet. Scanning the desolate ruins, Reese quietly questions if something catastrophic recently occurred on the demon side. He examines a massive, corrupted claw mark on a wall and realizes that demonic beasts completely slaughtered this village. The wise elf notes that the frequency of their monster encounters has been steadily rising as they travel deeper. Furthermore, every single beast they fight has proven to be incredibly powerful. He theorizes that the escalating threat level is directly linked to the rapidly thickening miasma choking the land. Checking on his companion, Reese casts a purification spell over Minori, and she warmly confirms she feels perfectly fine. Suddenly stopping in her tracks, Minori urgently points out that this particular village feels freshly destroyed. Glaring down an ominous alleyway, Reese freezes as he spots a gruesome, fresh trail of blood staining the dirt. Alertly scanning the area, Minori freezes as she hears the unmistakable sounds of a violent struggle nearby. Confirming her suspicions with a sharp nod, Reese prepares for combat as they both rush toward the source of the commotion. Bursting onto the scene, they find a pack of ferocious demonic beasts ruthlessly cornering a group of terrified figures. Pausing for a split second, Reese's eyes widen in disbelief as he begins to realize the true nature of the victims. Staring at the horned individuals in shock, Minori gasps as she realizes they are witnessing demons being hunted by their own kind. The air fills with blood-curdling screams as the beasts lunge forward with bared fangs and murderous intent. Springing into action, Reese shouts for everyone to get down while he readies a powerful counterspell. With a fluid, practiced motion, Minori swings her blade in a devastating arc that cleaves through the nearest monster. Panting from the exertion, the young warrior turns to the survivors and asks if they are all right after the sudden rescue. The elderly demons stare back in pure bewilderment, whispering in disbelief at the sight of a hornless savior standing before them. Reflecting on his impulsive decision, Reese admits he helped purely in the heat of the moment despite the inherent risks. Looking at his companion, the elf notes that to these demons, their presence as a human and an elf must be an impossible sight. Minori waits tensely for a reaction while the survivors struggle to process the reality of their unlikely guardians. One of the demons finally breaks the silence, questioning how they can breathe the miasma and what purpose brought them to such a desolate place. Stepping forward with a gentle bow, a demon named Kuota introduces herself as the village chief and offers her sincere gratitude for the intervention. As the sky begins to darken, Kuota invites the duo to stay at her home as a token of her profound appreciation. Despite Minori's obvious hesitation, Reese flashes a friendly smile and graciously accepts the elderly chief's offer. Guiding them through the silent streets, Kuota leads the group toward a modest dwelling constructed from weathered wood and thatch. Entering the building, Minori looks around in wonder and notes the striking resemblance to traditional elven architecture. Pulling Reese aside, the young woman urgently whispers her concerns about why he is so willing to trust a demon. Glaring back at their host, Minori insists that staying in this territory is far too dangerous for them to remain relaxed. Reese acknowledges the danger but notes his surprise that the chief would even consider letting outsiders into her private home. He reminds Minori that their core objective is to gather intel on the demons, making this invitation an invaluable opportunity. Returning to the room, Chief Kuota apologizes for the wait while carrying a tray of steaming dishes. Setting the meal down, the chief humbly offers her cooking while expressing hope that it might suit their foreign palates. Minori is taken aback by the sight of the meal, noting with surprise that it looks exactly like normal human food. Carefully observing the preparation, Reese confirms there are no traces of poison or malicious enchantments within the dish. After offering a polite word of thanks, the travelers begin to eat while the chief watches them with a soft, expectant gaze. Savoring the first bite, a shocked Minori admits the food is actually delicious despite her earlier misgivings. The young warrior reflects on the gentle, nostalgic taste that reminds her of the home-cooked meals Silpha used to make. Reese agrees with a warm smile, noting that the meal gives him the same comforting feeling as eating Minori's own cooking. The sudden surge of nostalgia leaves the elven master momentarily speechless as he processes the unexpected connection. Watching them eat, Kuota's eyes mist over as she softly remarks that seeing them at her table makes it feel as though her own son has returned. She explains that her son left the elderly behind and mentions that many surrounding villages were completely decimated by beasts during the migration. The chief reveals a heartbreaking reality where every single young person has abandoned their homes and families. She explains that exactly 3 years ago, the youth left en masse to lend their strength to the Demon King's grand revival. Since that mass exodus, the village has fallen into a state of ruin and remains completely unable to defend itself against constant monster attacks. Shocked by the revelation, Minori questions why demonic beasts would ever turn their fangs against the demons they supposedly serve. Reese gazes into the distance and notes that the dynamics of their world seem to mirror the same struggles found among human societies. He concludes that the reality of the demon realm is vastly different from anything they had previously expected to find. Blushing with nervous hesitation, Minori stammers out a refusal as the elderly chief Kuota casually reaches up to grab a wooden plate. Watching the old woman work, Minori fondly recalls the cherished moments she spent with the person who acted as her surrogate mother. Breaking the nostalgic silence, the young warrior tentatively offers to help out, prompting a surprised but gentle inquiry from their host about her late mentor. Flashing a bright, unwavering smile, the young warrior passionately insists that her mentor's warm spirit still lives on through her actions. Glancing back with wise eyes, Kuota notes that Minori's radiant expression perfectly conveys the depth of that enduring love. Softening her stance, the young girl officially introduces herself as Minori, prompting a warm acknowledgement from the elderly chief. Peeking quietly from around the corner, Reese watches with a soft smile as his student happily helps the old demon wash the dishes. Later on, Minori turns to her master and questions the stark contrast between their peaceful experience and the violent history books claiming demons are the ultimate enemy. She notes the complete lack of hostility from the village elders and wonders aloud what could have possibly driven the younger generation to embrace such a destructive path. A heavy shadow falls over Kuota's face as she bitterly recalls how the youth abandoned their home exactly 3 years ago to eagerly lend their strength to the Demon King. Staring grimly ahead, Reese realizes that Kuota's son will inevitably become their enemy on the battlefield, solidifying his resolve to personally intervene if the Dark Lord revives. A few days later, Reese and Minori proudly present a massive pile of valuable materials recovered from the ferocious beasts they spent the day hunting. Absolutely stunned by the massive haul, the elderly chief gasps in awe and profusely thanks the duo for culling so many dangerous monsters. Flashing a bright, humble smile, Reese happily insists the favor is entirely mutual since she graciously allowed them to stay in her home. Shifting to a slightly more serious tone, the Elven Master notes that while they easily cleared out the immediate threats, there is still a lingering question. He curiously asks the elderly demon if she was ever terrified of inviting 2 complete strangers from a supposedly hostile race right into her living room. Adjusting her glasses, the wise chief simply chuckles at the concern and gently dismisses the historical animosity between their people. Pointing a knowing finger, she playfully observes that the human and the elf standing before her are incredibly intimate despite belonging to entirely different species. Caught completely off guard by the blunt observation, the 2 travelers lock eyes in stunned, blushing silence. Waving her arms in absolute panic, a furiously blushing Minori stammers for an explanation while the old woman chuckles and warns them never to underestimate an elder's intuition. Smiling with pure maternal warmth, Kuota gently declares that a person's race does not matter and that she treasures both of them deeply. Deeply moved by her unconditional kindness, the human and the elf flash matching smiles and warmly echo her exact sentiments. As the peaceful hearth crackles in the background, they softly declare their profound love for the gentle demon they now affectionately call Grandma Kuota. Standing outside the thatched roof house, Reese and Minori express their profound love for Grandma Kuota. Beaming with pure affection, Kuota calls them a bunch of cute kids and warmly admits she wants them to stay in the village forever. Minori smiles gently and thanks the elderly demon for her incredibly kind hospitality. Reese solemnly states that despite his desire to learn more about this world, they absolutely must continue their journey. He adds that he also wants to uncover the deep secrets surrounding the demons themselves. The very next day, Reese takes a deep, focused breath as he stands before the gathered village elders. Channeling his immense magical power, the young elf prepares to cast his ultimate barrier magic. He fiercely invokes the spell Valkyria Glitter, summoning the devastating glare of the goddess of war. A brilliant, sweeping light erupts from the elf, completely washing over the awestruck villagers. Reese proudly explains that this ancient barrier magic will prevent any demonic beasts from approaching the village as long as he draws breath. Overjoyed by this incredible gift, Kuota declares they can now peacefully wait for her son and the others to return. Lowering his gaze, Reese quietly asks if her son ran off when the youth heard the rumors about the Demon King's revival. A vivid flashback reveals the young demons marching away with their horns glowing a bright, menacing red. Kuota explains that demons use their horns to convert poisonous miasma into magic power, allowing them to easily survive in such harsh environments. Minori gasps in sudden realization, deducing that the demons can exert far more power when surrounded by thicker miasma. Reese nods confidently and notes that he fully understood this physical mechanic the moment he first saw them. He explains that demons can effortlessly generate external magic power simply by absorbing the miasma lingering in the air. Staring seriously ahead, the elf states this is exactly why the demons managed to survive even after the legendary hero defeated their king. He attributes their enduring survival entirely to the incredibly thick miasma blanketing the entire realm of Daos. Kuota softly adds that she also had the natural ability to sense miasma back when she was young. Closing her eyes with a sad, nostalgic smile, the elderly chief admits that things are completely different now. She recalls how her son's physical appearance drastically changed, noting that his horns turned a deeper, more terrifying red than she had ever seen before. The other elders angrily curse the youth as absolute fools for being led astray by unconfirmed rumors regarding the Demon King's revival. Processing this crucial information, Reese mentally confirms his suspicion that the village elders do not feel strongly about the Dark Lord's return. He deduces that they view the Demon King merely as a fairy tale figure from the past, which perfectly explains why they treated human guests so nicely. Minori loudly interrupts his thoughts, frantically pointing out that the Demon King's revival is absolutely not just a simple fairy tale. Catching himself, Reese quietly calls her name to calm her down before she accidentally reveals too much dangerous information. Minori trails off, silently worrying about what will actually happen when the villagers realize the devastating truth about the revival. Gripping her hands together, Kuota solemnly states that they simply want everyone to return alive and well. Flashing a gentle, heartbroken smile, the old mother reiterates that their children's safe return is absolutely all they ask for. Reese vividly remembers Grillet's dying wish, begging him to find the hero and defeat the Demon Lord for the sake of humanity's future. Torn entirely between two worlds, the Elven Master silently agonizes over how destroying the Demon King will inevitably pit him against Grandma Kuota's beloved son. Breaking the heavy tension, Kuota suddenly gasps and admits she completely forgot to give them something highly important. The elders present a heavily worn box, humbly offering it as a token of their immense gratitude for saving the village. Minori gasps in pure shock, recognizing the item as an incredibly valuable grimoire with only a few rare copies in existence. She marvels at the ancient text, noting with absolute awe that the entire book is written in the elusive demon language. Trembling with uncontrollable excitement, a wide-eyed Reese desperately reaches for the book while Minori strictly reminds him it is time for their farewells. Sweating profusely, Reese begs for just a tiny peek inside the grimoire, but Minori firmly shuts the book and denies his request. Glaring playfully at her master, she vows not to hand it over because he would absolutely spend the entire day reading it instead of traveling. Watching them bicker, the smiling elders note that Reese's desperate body language clearly proves this was the absolute best gift they could have possibly given. Handing over the ancient grimoire, the elderly chief warmly hopes the treasure proves useful to their journey. Staring at the priceless artifact, an overwhelmed Minori asks why the chief would gift them something so incredibly valuable. Flashing a gentle smile, the wise demon explains she truly believed Reese when he earnestly declared his desire to learn more about their world. She expresses profound gratitude, noting that the human and elf went to incredible lengths just to protect their defenseless village. Gripping her shawl with renewed hope, the old mother vows to endure a little longer while believing her children will eventually return home safely. Gazing softly at her saviors, she firmly reiterates her absolute faith that everyone will come back alive. Chuckling warmly, Kuota genuinely praises the young elf for his incredibly kind heart. Shaking hands in a bittersweet farewell, the travelers finally depart from Grandma Kuota's village and march deeper into the treacherous demon realm. Meanwhile, exactly 1 month before the duo left the demon village, a bustling human fortress stands tall against the horizon. Inside the Adventurers Guild, a stern receptionist flatly refuses to let a solo adventurer take on any dangerous missions. Desperately trying to negotiate, the lone boy pleads his case while the receptionist remains completely unfazed. Whispers ripple through the tavern as onlookers recognize the magicless baggage carrier who supposedly died after being abandoned by his party. Staring in pure shock, the gossiping adventurers cannot believe the weak boy actually survived the deadly forest. Suddenly bursting with rage, a tiny dragon pops out of Jin's cloak and furiously screams at the receptionist for completely ignoring its presence. Coughing awkwardly, the receptionist calmly explains that guild safety regulations strictly require a minimum of 2 E-rank adventurers to accept a quest. An absolutely furious Vritra screeches in pure offense as the receptionist politely refuses to count a mere pet toward the official quota. While Jin desperately tries to calm his enraged dragon, the receptionist bluntly points out the boy's severe magical handicap. She firmly insists that completing any guild request is fundamentally impossible without the use of basic magic. Slumping onto a bench outside, an utterly defeated Jin admits that every single party totally rejected his application while Vritra ruthlessly laughs at his misery. Staring at the cobblestone street, the magicless boy bitterly realizes that his infamous reputation has already completely ruined his chances in this town. Vritra bluntly declares that absolutely no sane party would ever recruit a magicless burden, causing Jin to groan at the harsh truth. Clenching his fists, the determined boy remembers his grand departure and fiercely vows to overcome this massive hurdle completely on his own. Just as Jin pumps himself up to keep trying, a sudden voice calls out and completely interrupts his train of thought. Standing tall before them is a confident, spiky-haired young adventurer wearing sturdy armor and a friendly smirk. Leaning in curiously, the stranger reveals he was watching the whole guild fiasco and asks if Jin is truly completely incapable of using magic. Completely caught off guard by the blunt question, Jin stares in confusion while a grumpy Vritra instantly decides it absolutely hates this new guy. Taking a seat right next to the bewildered duo, The stranger casually mentions that he just arrived in town and is also flying solo. Flashing a brilliant smile, the energetic adventurer boldly asks Jin to team up and form a brand new party together. Enraging Vritra by calling it a pet again, the stranger completely brushes off Jin's lack of magic and happily offers to carry the combat load himself. Gripping the newcomer's extended hand, the stunned boy introduces himself as Jin while his new companion proudly declares his name is Raiden. Pumping his fist with pure excitement, Raiden cheerfully finalizes their partnership and tells Jin he just needs to tag along for the ride. Puffing his chest out with overwhelming pride, Raiden boasts that he is the absolute strongest earth mage his village has ever seen. Moments later in the forest, a completely dumbfounded Raiden screams in sheer terror as he witnesses something utterly impossible. Staring at a massive pile of defeated monsters, a trembling Raiden stammers out a question about Jin's supposed inability to use magic. Wiping sweat from his brow, Jin sincerely admits that while lacking magic has always been a terrible handicap, it pushed him to master the blade. Absolutely fired up by the boy's incredible physical prowess, Raiden wildly declares that he still has a ton of training to do himself. Marching forward with burning determination, Jin internally swears to train even harder so he can finally catch up to his legendary master. Trailing slightly behind, a sweating Raiden gulps nervously as he realizes he might have accidentally teamed up with a total monster. As Jin happily announces his 50th kill, the Earth Mage completely panics over the terrifying reality of his new partner's overwhelming strength. Back in the bustling city, a group of seasoned adventurers drink at a tavern when a familiar face suddenly pushes through the guild doors. Smirking into his mug, a veteran adventurer mocks the arrival of Croxonaire's party, noting how they used to be famous rookies just a year ago. The men cruelly gossip about how the party's reputation completely tanked after they mercilessly abandoned their magicless porter to die. Overhearing the nasty rumors, the party's leader Luke glares furiously just as a drunkard loudly mentions seeing their abandoned porter completely alive and well. The gossip continues to spin wild tales about the magicless boy showing up at the guild and forming a brand new party with a total amateur. Exploding with pure, violent rage, Luke violently slams the drunkard into the wall and fiercely demands to know if the rumors of Jin's survival are actually true. A feral, one-horned rabbit bounds aggressively across the open plains, charging straight toward a determined Raiden. Igniting his fist with powerful magic, the confident Earth Mage fiercely welcomes the incoming beast and dares it to bring it on. Raiden violently slams his glowing fist into the ground, summoning a jagged pillar of earth that brutally launches the monster into the air. As the stunned creature sails helplessly through the sky, Raiden urgently shouts a warning that the beast is heading right for his partner. Standing his ground, Jin channels his focused energy into his blade and fiercely invokes his magic interference spell to intercept the beast. Unleashing a powerful battle cry, the young warrior swings his enchanted blade and completely shatters the monster's defenses in a single strike. Raiden enthusiastically cheers for the flawless victory while a humble Jin credits the Earth Mage for perfectly luring the target into striking range. Reflecting on their 2 weeks together, Raiden silently marvels at how Jin possesses perfectly refined swordsmanship and a terrifyingly keen sense for mana despite lacking any natural magic power. Staring intently at the unassuming weapon, the Earth Mage realizes that there is another baffling mystery surrounding his new companion. Unable to contain his curiosity, Raiden abruptly demands to know why the boy's simple wooden sword is radiating such an absurd amount of stored magical energy. Completely oblivious to his own terrifying aura, Jin innocently tilts his head while a sweating Raiden admits that his new partner is incredibly intimidating. Meanwhile, back at the bustling Adventurers Guild, the stern receptionist officially verifies the successful mission of a D-rank party known as the Travelers of Hope. Raising her voice for the entire hall to hear, she proudly announces that the promising group has been officially promoted to a certified C-rank adventurer party. The receptionist respectfully presents the triumphant adventurers with a gleaming bronze guild button to signify their newly elevated status. Celebrating their rapid promotion with a hearty feast, Raiden cheerfully notes that the other adventurers are already calling them the hottest up-and-coming rookies in town. Despite their rapid ascent, the Earth Mage heavily sighs and complains that they are still trapped dealing with the exact same frustrating bureaucratic challenges as before. Slumping back in his chair, Raiden glares at a lucrative quest form that strictly requires a minimum of 3 C-rank members to officially accept. An absolutely furious Vritra complains that the guild still refuses to acknowledge him as an official member, prompting a sheepish Jin to admit he completely forgot about the new rank requirements. Raiden casually shoos the tiny dragon away to eat some meat, causing Vritra to angrily swear that this entire problem would be solved in an instant if he could just transform back into his colossal true body. The cheerful atmosphere instantly shatters as Luke approaches the table and casts a vicious glare down at the stunned, magicless boy. Flanked by his equally bewildered party members, the cruel leader stares in absolute disbelief as he realizes the rumors of Jin's miraculous survival are actually true. Sensing the sudden, suffocating tension, Raiden cautiously asks his partner if these intimidating strangers are old acquaintances. Completely ignoring Raiden, an enraged Luke violently slams his hand on the table and screams at Jin for having the audacity to try and crawl back into their C-rank party. One of the mags bitterly mutters that their group used to proudly hold a B-rank status before everything completely fell apart. Exploding with pure, unrestrained fury, Luke violently grabs the boy by the collar and aggressively demands to know how he dared to shamelessly show his face again. The vicious leader screams that Jin's pathetic blunder caused their reputation to absolutely plummet all the way down to D rank while a shocked Raiden steps in to intervene. Flashing a deadly, murderous glare, Luke violently threatens the Earth Mage and orders all bystanders to keep their mouths completely shut. Turning his venomous attention back to his former comrade, Luke coldly states that the magicless burden was absolutely supposed to die in that cursed forest. Gripping the collar even tighter, the disgraced leader hysterically demands to know how a weakling managed to survive such a hopeless, deadly situation. Gritting his teeth against the suffocating grip, a trembling Jin struggles to find his words while the furious leader orders him to speak up. Staring bravely back into the eyes of his abuser, Jin firmly declares that his life was miraculously saved by a passing stranger. Refusing to accept this logical explanation, a sweating Luke immediately calls bullshit on the ridiculous claim. The panicked leader hysterically asks if Jin expects him to believe that a legendary A-rank adventurer just conveniently wandered by to slaughter two overwhelmingly powerful beasts. Narrowing his eyes with unwavering absolute conviction, Jin solemnly clarifies that his savior's terrifying power vastly exceeds the boundaries of any mortal ranking system. The young warrior proudly reveals that this unfathomable master not only rescued him from certain death but actively taught a magicless cripple exactly how to fight back. Raising his voice for everyone to hear, Jin fiercely announces that his master personally entrusted him with the monumental destiny of defeating the legendary demon lord. Burning with an unshakable, fiery resolve, the young boy shouts that fulfilling this grand destiny is the exact reason he clawed his way back to civilization. A moment of stunned silence hangs over the tavern before Luke aggressively shoves the boy away and bursts into mocking, arrogant laughter. Finding the grand proclamation absolutely hysterical, the cruel adventurer openly mocks the absurd concepts of the demon lord and humanity's ultimate savior. Sneering with pure, unadulterated disgust, Luke coldly declares that absolutely no one will ever believe the pathetic delusions of a cripple who cannot even cast a simple spell. Stepping up to the crowd, Luke loudly announces to the entire tavern that Jin has always been a pathetic liar. Jin desperately insists that Master Reese is real, but Luke merely sneers and claims the overpowered master only exists inside the boy's delusional head. Furious at the blatant disrespect, Raiden glares fiercely at the arrogant leader and prepares to defend his new partner. Crossing his arms with a cocky grin, Luke demands solid proof of this miraculous rescue while Raiden firmly backs up Jin's character. The heated argument abruptly halts when a mysterious, cloaked figure steps forward and calmly demands everyone wait a moment. Annoyed by the interruption, Luke rudely snaps at the stranger just as she turns to Jin and asks if his savior was named Reese. Flashing a knowing look, the mysterious newcomer reveals she knows someone by that exact name and firmly declares that the boy is telling the truth. Exploding with unchecked rage, Luke furiously orders the meddling outsider to shut up and stay out of their business. Staring closely at the stranger's hood, Jin's eyes widen in absolute shock as he notices her distinct, pointed ears. Pulling down her mask, the mysterious figure reveals her true identity as a genuine elf, leaving the entire guild completely speechless. The heavy silence shatters as a frantic human woman bursts through the crowd and desperately calls out for Ryab. Panting heavily, the woman angrily scolds the elusive elf for wandering off and completely disappearing without a single trace. Hearing the commotion, a seasoned adventurer in the crowd gasps in pure disbelief as he recognizes the legendary name Ryab Lowry. Whispers wildly erupt across the tavern as the onlookers realize the stranger is the legendary living history book who rarely shows herself to humans. Sweating nervously, the awestruck adventurers desperately wonder why such a mythical figure suddenly appeared in their humble guild. Realizing the devastating truth, Luke's party members pale in terror as they deduce Jin's story is entirely real, prompting a panicked Luke to order a retreat. Refusing to accept his humiliating defeat, the disgraced leader violently turns on his own terrified comrades and screams at them to shut up. Completely losing his mind, A rabid Luke wins up a vicious punch and attempts to strike the legendary elf while screaming that she is just another liar. Moving with blinding speed, a fiercely protective Jin dives into the line of fire and flawlessly intercepts the brutal punch to save the elf. The chaotic brawl instantly freezes as the imposing guild master steps into the room and sternly declares that he will handle the situation. Glaring down at the disgraced B-rank party, the guild master brings up their highly suspicious missing member report from exactly 1 year ago. Narrowing his eyes with absolute authority, the guild master darkly asks if he should reopen the investigation into their abandoned porter. Defeated and utterly humiliated, a furious Luke glares silently at the floor before turning his back on his former victim. Shamed in front of the entire guild, the disgraced party completely withdraws and quietly shuffles out the door. Releasing a heavy sigh of relief, Raiden quickly turns to his partner and asks if the boy is all right after the chaotic confrontation. Catching his breath, a grateful Jin steps away from his partner and approaches the legendary elf who just saved his reputation. Bowing deeply with profound respect, Jin eagerly invites Ryab to dinner as a token of his gratitude while she humbly insists she merely wanted to help. Flashing a gentle smile, the ancient elf graciously accepts the young boy's warm invitation. Utterly bewildered by the bizarre turn of events, Raiden scratches his head but gladly goes along with the flow. Realizing his rudeness in the excitement, a flustered Jin frantically apologizes for failing to properly introduce his own team. Smiling warmly, the legendary elf formally introduces herself as Ryab Lowry, playfully noting that she is merely reaching her middle age. Gesturing gently toward her frantic human companion, Ryab introduces the young woman as Anastasia. The legendary elf proudly adds that Anastasia currently serves as her dedicated, hard-working apprentice. Sometime later, over a massive feast, Jin solemnly explains that their newly formed C-rank party desperately needs more members to accept guild requests. Slumping his shoulders, the boy bitterly admits that absolutely no sane adventurer would ever want to join a crippled magicless fighter. Shoving food into his mouth, Raiden complains that their team is heavily unbalanced since they rely entirely on basic physical attacks and earth magic. Pointing an accusing finger at Vritra, the Earth Mage brutally mocks the tiny dragon for boasting about being a legendary evil beast when it can barely light a cigarette. Thrashing around in absolute fury, a heavily insulted Vritra screams that his pathetic output is only because he hasn't completely mastered his tiny new body. Raiden sarcastically hopes the dragon will eventually learn to cook a chicken skewer, pushing Vritra to hysterically brag about possessing enough raw power to completely obliterate a town. Whining pitifully, the tiny dragon furiously accuses Reese of intentionally tricking him with a flawed body, prompting a fiercely loyal Jin to boldly defend his master's flawless skills. Staring seriously ahead, the ancient elf admits that the tiny dragon's harsh words might not be entirely wrong. She calmly explains to the dragon that his severely limited power is actually a direct result of a sloppy, botched magical procedure performed by his creator. Narrowing her eyes to analyze the tiny beast, she points out a vague disturbance swirling deep within the magical circuitry running through his miniature body. Shifting her attention away from the bewildered dragon, Ryab turns to Jin and casually brings up his earlier conversation. She points directly at the young boy and confirms that he is indeed Reese's apprentice, earning a surprised but enthusiastic agreement from Jin. Jin proudly declares his profound respect for his elven master, prompting Ryab to chuckle and ominously note that she will have to keep a much closer eye on their group. Folding her hands with a devious smirk, the ancient elf completely stuns the young adventurers by politely asking if they would allow her to join their newly formed party. Raiden explodes with pure excitement over gaining a new member while Ryab calmly reassures them that her personal B-rank status will easily clear any guild requirements. Sweating nervously, Anastasia frantically volunteers to join as well while an overjoyed Raiden drags Jin off to immediately submit their brand new party application. Watching the chaotic trio sprint away toward the guild counter, Ryab quietly calls out into the empty space behind her. Smirking mischievously at the hovering dragon, she questions Vritra about his exact relationship with the Elven Master. Offering a secretive deal, she promises to completely repair the broken magical circuits trapping the dragon's power as long as he swears to keep quiet about her true identity. Flashing a terrifying, knowing smile, the ancient elf notes that it is ultimately a master's duty to clean up after their foolish apprentice's messes. Eager to finally regain his absolute power, the tiny dragon aggressively zips his lips shut and enthusiastically accepts the dark bargain. Bouncing around in midair with pure joy, Vritra cheers wildly at the prospect of finally throwing off his humiliating handicap. Taking a slow sip of her warm drink, Ryab softly notes that Reese seems to be genuinely enjoying his time out in the wider world. Meanwhile, roughly 6 months after Reese and Minori bid their final farewells, they finally arrive at another devastated settlement deep within the demon realm. Stepping through the shattered wooden beams of the ruined village, Reese grimly notes that this town suffered the exact same brutal fate as the others. Peeking nervously from behind a broken wall, Minori whispers to her master that she recognizes the unique dialect left behind in the scattered remains. Glaring into the desolate shadows of the slaughtered village, Reese realizes with a heavy heart that his terrible premonition has finally come true.